Hello and welcome back to my channel, Deku Fanfic. Today, we're kicking off the movie of, What If Deku Had Teleport Quirk. The author of this story is, nameless_maybe_not, from fanfiction.net. Now, let's dive into the fanfic. Izuku found out he had a meta ability when he was 20 years old, and he decided to fight for the meta ability rights in year 2020, yes, he was born in the year, as most would say. And his meta ability was something along teleportation, and some kind of a place. Izuku didn't have time to think about his meta ability, because he was in a war when he found out. But when Izuku turned 62, he left society to hide from the war that he was a big part of, just because people wanted to use him for the greater good. Izuku couldn't fight anymore, so he left to hide for almost 170 years. Where Izuku hid for many years. It was inside his meta ability, cause it was the safest place he could think about, and he could bring things to life in there, so he wouldn't die of boredom. When Izuku woke up that morning, he thought about the human world, OMG. He sounded like an alien, and then Izuku took his time when he was about to look how long he was gone. The date outside his meta ability is May 16, 2223, Izuku has been inside his meta ability for 161 years. How old is Izuku right now? Izuku started to count with his fingers, but then stopped and looked at the year again. If he was born in year 2000, does that mean he's 223 years old? Izuku is about to have a mental breakdown, and he thought leaving society was a good idea. Izuku let a single tear go down his eye, and then he jumped up from his bed. Not like I had anyone important. Izuku spoke to himself with a smirk as he started to make a portal to the outside world. Oh, Izuku is so excited about leaving, he has been so lonely in here, and now he's finally leaving. After hacking so many lonely therapy sessions, and many lonely breakfasts, lunches, dinners and sleepovers. It took Izuku longer to get out than he would have liked, because he thought he was ready to leave his meta ability, but then the dark thoughts got into his head, all the what-ifs. When Izuku got over his mental breakdown, he fastly jumped through the portal, and what on the other side was, it was so surprising Izuku whooped in happiness, and then looked around the place. There were mutation meta abilities, some people had different colored hair, and others used their meta abilities to good stuff with people around. But what Izuku didn't expect was that, there were Fanji superheroes. Izuku's surprise must have shown on his face, because some adults chuckled at the mesmerized look on his face, and Izuku's face went from, wow, to a, oh, yes. Izuku knew what he wanted to be for some time of his endless life. No more hiding from the world, baby, it's time to make people feel safer around heroes. Izuku is so going to make his time alive thrive, and he means the time he can spend with the name he will be using. Izuku doesn't know how the world works. Everything is so much different from the past, and one of the things Izuku realized. It was that, there was no one who knew what a vine was. Izuku decided that maybe he shouldn't have come back, he will not live with people who don't understand a word that's coming out of his mouth. Izuku pumped into a person that could only reach his hip, and then he looked down to apologize to them, only to stop in his tracks as he looked at the person. Because, is that a stoat? Izuku thought they went extinct when he left. Izuku shook his head sharply. I apologize. Izuku told the stoat as he started to look around the places again. And is that a mall? Oh, Izuku hasn't been able to go into a mall in centuries, and that's not even a lie. Izuku stayed still for some time, then the same stoat spoke to him, and Izuku looked at the stoat in silence for a while. Sorry, wasn't listening. Go again. Izuku answered the white stoat when they didn't speak to Izuku, and the stoat opened their mouth to speak. Somebody had pumped into Nedzu when he walked out of the mall, and then apologized after a while of silence, and then stared at the mall as they mumbled about not going into a mall in centuries. And then the person had stayed watching into the distance for a while. Hello, I am Nedzu. What about you? Nedzu spoke to the person who snapped out of their haze, and then stared at him in silence for a while. Nedzu doesn't understand what he was supposed to do at the moment. The human was staring at him in silence, and then they opened their mouth. Sorry, wasn't listening, go again, the human finally said to Nedzu, who was standing there in front of them all with him. I am Nedzu. What about you? Nedzu asked with a chipper voice, and the person got a sheepish look on their face as they put their hand on the back of their neck. I'm Midori, I'm Akatani Mikumo. Mikumo answered his guest Ion, but changed his name in the middle of it, and then looked away. So his name is not Akatani Mikumo, but something starting with a Midori. Is he the immortal Midoriya Izuku who just disappeared one day, and then never came back to help in the Quirk Wars? Hello, Midoriya. Nedzu said to the immortal man, and the man looked at Nedzu as if his look could murder him, then he turned around and walked away. Nedzu stopped for a while, and then started to follow the immortal man who only walked faster away from him. Nedzu started to run with his tiny legs, the immortal man looked back at him, and only started to go faster. Soon the two were both running, and the people they passed looked at them judgedly. The immortal man was faster than Nedzu, but it looked like he still wasn't that fast. Izuku didn't strengthen his body when he was in his meta ability, he only made himself smarter in it. That's why he has been walking the whole day, and not running around like a headless chicken. The stoat was running behind him, so that must mean the stoat was slower than Izuku? Right? Izuku stopped running when he found himself in front of a huge building, and there was a hobo-looking man waiting in there. The stoat was right behind Izuku. The stoat patted Izuku's knee. Izuku sighed quietly as he followed the stoat, because did he really have a choice about this? The stoat looked like a rich person, and that was really the only thing Izuku could think about. When Izuku was just about to pass the gate, he shouted, "CK," loudly and backed off only to get wrapped into something. KNKY. Izuku said under his breath as the thing tightened around him. The hobo-looking man sighed deeply, as he pulled Izuku past the gate and into the building property. Izuku pouted slightly to himself. It didn't take long for them to arrive. In a office, and Izuku thinks that it's Nedzu's. The stoat looks like an important figure in this society. So, what's you want? Izuku questioned with a smirk on his face, and then looked at the stoat in the eyes. Izuku found out that if you stare an animal in the eyes, and they look away first, they let you have dominance. Nedzu accepted his challenge right away, and they spent time silently looking each other in the eyes. Neither of them blinked or moved to speak. The hobo man coughed to get their attention on him. Izuku moved his other eye to look at the man, and the other stayed on Nedzu's eyes. The stoat didn't have a change in his posture or anything, but his eyes showed how it disturbed him. Yes, butterfly? Izuku asked the young adult who glared at him. Izuku raised a brow at the adult, and then moved his body to a more comfortable posture, because he is too tired to sit straightly. Do not call me that, and I want to know why you're here, Butterfly said, and then asked as he stood in the corner of the room. Izuku knows why he's standing there, it's because he's watching Izuku's every move. I do as well, Butterfly. Izuku answered the guest Ion, and then moved his whole attention on the stoat. When someone has his whole attention, it doesn't feel nice, because last time it was described to him, they told as if someone was about to not let them die, but at the same time not let them live. Izuku saw how the fur on the stoat stood up, and then they looked away from Izuku's cold eyes, because that is what they are cold and calculative. You're here because you wanted to be here. Nedzu's chipper voice did not hide the fact that his fur was high, and really unruly at the moment. Butterfly was glaring at Izuku even harder now, but no glare is stronger than Izuku's, or hashtag. He only raised his brow at the young adult again, because you don't disrespect a elder like that. Aizawa-kun, show respect. Nedzu almost hissed at his only personal student, because this man is dangerous to everyone, and this man could beat you even if he was weak. Aizawa almost let his shock show on his face, but that is enough for the man to know about him, and this man finds out everything by observing his surroundings, or the things that interest him. Nedzu found only that out by the way that the man only raised his brow at his personal student, because what the man wants is respect, not more, or not even less. That's the only reason he started a animal-friendly dominance asserting, and Nezu realized that because of his personal student, because Nezu already showed respect to the man, and Aizawa only made his mood more wanting. Aizawa opened his mouth to speak up, but got interrupted by the man. "You should listen to the Stotling, Butterfly," Midoriya said to Nezu's personal student sharply, but it doesn't show in his voice, because the man hasn't talked to another person in a century. Aizawa was about to start speaking to Nezu, and he looked at Aizawa with the sharpest look he ever has, because Nezu thought he teached him better than this. Aizawa is acting like a teenager. "Aizawa, let us do the speaking." Nezu answered with the sharp look still directed towards Aizawa, and the young adult looked shocked and mad at the same time. Izuku looked at the conversation the two had, and he came to the conclusion that, Stotling doesn't get angry, scared or raise his voice at others, and lives his life acting the way he doesn't want to, but at the same time he acts sadistically, must be because he was some kind of an experiment in a facility. Butterfly is a strict, silent, tired and makes conclusions about things fastly and acts on them, and that he likes cats, has a blonde husband, likely will care for his students deeply for the time he knows them, and that he is Stotling's only personal student. "Stotling, you really should teach your students better," Izuku said after Stotling had spoken like an angry parent to Butterfly. Butterfly looked shocked and ready to really start breaking sheet. "I suppose so," Stotling answered truthfully. It looked like he found that out only now. Izuku saw it when he first saw Butterfly in front of him. "He doesn't hide things as well as you try," Izuku stated to the Stoat truthfully, because the Stotling shows him respect, Izuku will show him respect. "I know, but there isn't usually anything to find out about me," Stotling answered Izuku's guest Ion, which was along the lines, "Why don't you try to hide?" Izuku moved to lay on the chair, and then gave the Stotling a questioning look, because it's the other's time to ask guest Ions he wants answers to. Aizawa had sat down on top of a sleeping bag, and he looked angry that they were speaking about him when he was literally right there, and listening to the two speak. Nezu sat up straighter than before, and he got a glint into his beady eyes, then he smiled like the first time they met, that was some time ago now. "How old are you? Where were you hidden? Why did you hide? How high is your IQ? Do you have kids? When did you leave? Do you remember the boogeyman? Did you have a throne? Why is your hair white and do you regret leaving?" The Stotling shot off many guest Ions in one go, and then waited for Izuku to answer them all. Izuku chuckled lightly at the Stotling. "I am 223 years old, I was hidden in my meta ability, I hid because I was used as a shield for guns, grenades, and FNG bombs, my IQ is 253 or so, I don't know if I have kids because I was pretty gay, I left 62 years into my life, I know the boogeyman, he was a really important person, I did have a throne, my hair turned white when I spent the first 20 years in my meta ability, I don't regret leaving them behind, but I do regret leaving the only people that knew me personally, but all of them are dead now." Izuku answered all of the guest Ions truthfully, but a more slowly than the Stotling, because the answers were a bit longer than he would have thought. The Stotling processed the answers he got, and then started to write them down in a notebook that appeared out of nowhere, but Izuku saw him take it out of his desk. Izuku hopes the day won't last that much longer, because he really wants to go sleep in a bed. Izuku just spent almost 2 centuries away from human interaction. Izuku was let out of the office after speaking for 1 hour longer, and Butterfly is the one who shows the way to the room Izuku will be spending time in, and Stotling told him hero school strats in 2 months. Izuku will turn so many people into Vine Masters, and maybe find himself a lover, because he did not have time for lovers when he was alive 2 centuries ago, and Izuku wants to find love in others then. The one he swore to never leave behind. Izuku probably start training his body for the future, because he's lazier than FNG Minecraft streamers, and they sit in one spot for hours. Izuku just stood for 10 years, and then decided that his body needed to have muscles to move. Now he can only run as fast as a stoat, and they're small animals which have short legs, but really long lives to live. Izuku will force Stotling to have kids when he's old enough, because the Stotling is still too young to even consider it. Izuku spent 2 hours in his room planning his training plan, and it turned out good enough for Izuku. If someone else saw it, they would laugh in Izuku's lazy butt face, because the start is not even that much, but if he works like it tells, Izuku will be a fast runner again in the 2 months. Now Izuku just has to go ask the Stotling where he can train, because Izuku doesn't know where there is any places in this huge butt school, like Izuku doesn't know where he can get food from even. Even if he doesn't need it, it doesn't mean he doesn't want it. Izuku remembers how in the past you had to find places where even were working stores, because almost everything was destroyed in the Meta Wars, and the Meta Rights. Izuku was 34 years old when he was inside of a Pondan store, and there was hashtag with him, because there had to be 2 to come out alive, because the commission are everywhere, and they will find what they want. Izuku was digging around the place, and he had already found little snacks that would last for a few days, but then there was many footsteps close to the 2, and they tensed up fastly. They both ran when they heard the first shot, and Izuku didn't realize it, but hashtag had ran straight towards the commission men, just so Izuku could run away. Izuku turned around to say something to hashtag, but he was with the commission men. No. Izuku screamed the loudest he has ever as he turned around to teleport to hashtag S side. Izuku was too slow, and the building collapsed in front of Izuku, and he was left on the other side. No. Izuku cried out as he despairedly tried to teleport to the other side. But Izuku couldn't, he doesn't use his meta ability almost ever. Izuku shaked his head to make the bad memory go away, because he doesn't have time to think about the past, he can think about it in the much later future, because he has things to do now. Izuku left his room to ask about a training room, but he saw Butterfly talking to a purple-haired woman, and decided to go bother them instead, because he hasn't had people around in centuries. Hello, Butterfly and Kitty. Izuku said positively to the two young adults. Butterfly scowled at his nickname, and Kitty smiled seductively at Izuku, who returned with his own kind, the adult version of hello. Kitty spoke up. Hello, young man. Kitty said to Izuku seductively as she walked over to him with a sway to her steps. She put her hand under Izuku's chin, and she turned Izuku's head upwards. Izuku looked at Kitty with hot stuck eyes, and the young adult flushed like an adult would, then she turned towards Butterfly with starts in her eyes. Where did he appear from? Adult version of hello, Kitty asked while shrieking with delight. Butterfly sighed with feeling as he turned around and left the room. Izuku had also disappeared before Kitty could ask anything from him, because as much as Izuku likes the lady, they aren't that far into the friendship state yet, and she will have to wait for Izuku to reveal things about himself. Izuku was going towards the Stotling's office, and he saw some of the students that were there because of the summer camp, but didn't really take notice of them. Izuku was about to knock on the Stotling's door, but it opened before he even could knock. Come in, Midoriya. Stotling shouted with his chipper voice as Izuku stepped into the office. What do you need? The Stotling asked when he saw Izuku, and Izuku sat down on the chair that was the closest, because he knows smart people usually choose the one where they see the whole room, but Izuku knows if he's going to be attacked. Does this school have a training room? Izuku asked as he thought about what he would want to do for the rest of the first day, and then it clicked. Yes. The school does. The Stotling answered Izuku's guest Ion as he closed his computer, and then looked up towards Izuku, who was thinking about things. I'm going outside of the school. Izuku told the Stotling as he got up from the chair, and then started to leave the room with the Stotling. Okay, I will see you later. The Stotling said positively to Izuku as he left the room, and walked out of the school. It took him about 10 minutes to get out of the school. Izuku had no idea of where to go, so he chose to go to the shopping center, because there are a lot of people, and a lot of things that could be new to Izuku. Izuku looked around the place, and all he saw was old stuff, or even more older stuff. What happened to the world for it to go backwards in the technology? Izuku pumped into someone as short as him, and looked the person into their face apologize, only to stop before he even started to speak to him. Because is that Yoichi's secret love child, he looks like Yoichi so much. The teenager grumbled angrily as he continued to walk past Izuku. He has #########S personality too, is he their love child? Izuku stared into space. Izuku was 21 and on the run from the commission, because his meta ability had gone off one day in his work, and then he's a person to be targeted, or to be scared away from people. Now he's running in a street that was destroyed completely by people with meta abilities, and some of the commission men didn't even know if he was the right person to follow at the start. Izuku has been running for two hours already, and used his meta ability to teleport when they were too close to him, because he would give in, but he doesn't know what they would do to him. Izuku was further away from the commission men, and he had slowed down to a stop because he had pumped into someone taller than him. Izuku didn't look at the stranger and only teleported past the stranger. He could teleport only 5 meters at a time, and it still took a lot of his energy. When Izuku landed after he teleported, he almost dropped to the ground. Right after, but before he passed out, he felt someone catch his passing out body. Izuku shook the memory out of his head, because that's one of his first worst memories. He had passed out after running away from the commission, and then passed out on top of his savior. Izuku left the shopping center, and started to walk towards the school, because he wants to sleep outside his meta ability for the first time in two centuries. When Tamura had gone outside, he hadn't thought that he would pump into a person who looks like sensei so much, but with more childlike look to him. Tamura had gone outside to shop for new video games, but there weren't any good ones like the ones he got from sensei, and then he left the building only to pump into a person that looks like sensei. The guy had pumped into him, and then went to say something, but he had gone still and looked really shocked to see Tamura's face in front of himself. Tamura had returned into the house he lives in with sensei, and then sat on the soft couch. They lived in an average house with Kurojiri who cooks food for the 2 people, and himself. "Sensei, I saw someone who looked like you." Tamura started to speak when he got comfortable on the couch, and his raspy voice sounding excited. "Oh, really?" Asked the 16-year-old teenager as he raised a brow at him, and then turned towards Tamura when Izuku came into his mind. "What did they look like?" Asked the teenager who eagerly took the chance to speak up. He had bright green eyes, with freckles all over his face, and then he had white hair with a green tint to it. Don't know how that's possible, but it did look like it had some green lighting. Tamura explained to sensei in thought as he tried to get a better look at what he saw. "And he looked shocked to see me?" The teenager said, confusion showing in his voice. Took a shaky breath in as he tried to use the last piece of Izuku he had. It's a little bit of blood, so he could find where Izuku was after all these years. Because Izuku had just left one day, and there was nothing to tell if he was alive anymore, he should have locked him with Yoichi into the vault. Izuku was walking outside of U.A, and then walking inside the gates of it. Izuku always finds a way to surprise even if he isn't trying to. Has missed Izuku as much as he misses Yoichi, because Izuku had one day just passed out on Yoichi when he was running from the commission. And when Izuku one day was caught by the commission, he had disappeared 4 years later, only to come back after 2 centuries of hiding. Will seriously have a talk with his bother partner in crime when he catches him. Izuku felt a shiver go down his spine when he stepped into the school grounds, and he knew someone was watching him with their meta ability. Izuku has to keep an eye out for danger. Izuku has more people to meet, and more lives to destroy with his life, which is traumatize the children while you can, and then make them feel better about their own lives, because some people say they have gone through stuff. Well, Izuku has more problems than them. He can feel your pain, even if he would rather joke about it than talk about it. I sound like all of those fanfics he read back when he was only 19 years old. And those all turned out so cringe. Expect one, which is his favorite to this day. Izuku walked around the school, then into his room only to drop on top of the room's bed, because he was sleeping in his meta ability so much, and he had been doing nothing in it, because he was just tired the first 30 years, and when he got used to it, Izuku just existed another 40 years, and when he got over his shock he just lived like a normal person. Izuku fell asleep easily in the bed, and then slept easily for the whole night. He was used to sleeping really much, so it isn't so different to sleep in the real world. Good night, beautiful world. Izuku woke up that morning and chose coffee. The other choice was violence, and that's only because he hasn't had any type of coffee in centuries. Izuku really is using that word a lot these days. You've been out for only a day. Does Izuku choose coffee or cappuccino? And he chooses cappuccino. It's Izuku's favorite coffee and it wakes Izuku up from his morning grogginess, because Izuku is not a morning person, not even by heart. The only part that is a morning person of him is when Izuku has been awake for the whole night. Izuku got up from the bed he slept on, but not without a challenge, because when he was in his meta ability he didn't taste, feel or do anything human. That's why Izuku pretended that he could do those in his meta ability, even if everything was wrong about everything in it. Then Izuku started to walk towards the place he remembers the small kitchen was in. He passed Loud Sunrise, Present Mike, and Space Cat, 13, then Izuku met with Butterfly in the kitchen. Mornin', Butterfly. Izuku greeted the grumpy Butterfly as he passed him to go look into the cabinets. Izuku didn't find what he wanted. He looked through the cabinet again. This got Loud Sunrise's attention. What are you looking for, little listener? Loud Sunrise asked Izuku as Izuku tried to find cappuccino making things. He remembers what they look like, so why can't he find it? Cappuccino. Izuku answered simply as he started to look again. The room had gotten silent after Izuku said that. Izuku turned to look at what got them silent. They were all looking at him weirdly. The illegal drag, Butterfly questioned Izuku, and Izuku saw his life flash before his eyes. No. Illegal? Izuku shouted in distress, because that coffee ain't no drag. It's coffee, not anything bad could have happened to the coffee. Right? What about latte? Izuku asked in sadness, because if cappuccino is gone that sheet better too. Izuku will not be here by tomorrow if there's some why still is latte, and people decided that cappuccino was a drag. Another illegal drag? Vamtitan, Vlad King, whispered to himself as Izuku asked about latte. Izuku jumped down from the cabinets, and then crumbled to the floor in sadness, because what happened when he was gone? At least it isn't legal. Izuku whimpered to himself quietly, and then coffee came to mind. Oh please Lord have mercy on Izuku's soul if there isn't coffee. And coffee? Izuku asked from the ground as people were about to look if he was alive. Not illegal, everyone drinks that. Stotling's voice came from the top of the cabinet, and some people flinched at the Stotling's appearance. Because he's too quiet when he appears, Izuku knew he was there already. Izuku let a happy sob leave him as he uncurled from the floor and got up. Oh thank God. Izuku would have left before anyone blinked if coffee wasn't legal, because it would be hell on earth after living with coffee his whole life. Izuku had trained for two hours already, and that would be enough for the rest of the day, because it will match with Izuku's body and how Izuku's body will development. Not anything like the hell Izuku had to go through when he was in the past. Izuku had to carry so much just so nothing was left behind to go to waste. Izuku was 23 years old at the moment, and he was carrying the things they had with hashtag, because Yoichi was still on the run from his older brother. Izuku doesn't know why and he won't guess I on it. Izuku himself had met the man when he was 21, and he could see that the man was obsessed with Yoichi, and wanted to make things better for him, but Izuku could see the way hashtag would sometimes stare at Izuku, but when the two had gotten closer in the year and a half they were together, the man had gotten a different glint into them. But in the end it was Yoichi who wanted to leave. Izuku followed because he knows that Yoichi can't take care of himself, and because the way hashtag had seemed to accept the glint he had, it only made things even weirder on Izuku's end. We need to move fast, We don't want to see any of the commission, or hashtag 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 dot. Hashtag 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 informed the two, who were walking behind him, and Izuku started to move faster forwards. Izuku shook his head again to make the memory go back, because he has no time for them at the moment. Izuku still needs to make things right in his life, and then make him like a normal person. Because the way Izuku is living will only confuse everyone he crosses, just because they don't understand what things Izuku was taught when he was alive in the past. Izuku hopes everyone he knew in the past was dead, because then he doesn't have to re-meet them again, like he did Yoichi's and hashtag 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 s secret love child, and that was a really weird meeting. Hashtag 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 was making a plan on how he could snatch Izuku, and then have the talk they need to have after not meeting in two centuries. Hashtag 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 had known Izuku for 10 to 13 years when they were in the past, because of course he had to take a appearance-looking Quirk. It would take about 4 to 6 years to snatch the teenager, mentally, because as smart as hashtag 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 was, he could never beat Izuku's smartness. He was always the smartest of the brothers' people who were following the person leading them to the fight of rights. Hashtag 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 should have locked Izuku with his brother Yoichi when he snatched Yoichi from the group, but the teenager had been a step too far away from hashtag 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 to snatch him too. He had made so many plans to catch Izuku, but the teenager always knew when hashtag 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 was about to snatch him from the group that was going into war they couldn't win, suicide mission. It wouldn't go the same way as it did in the past, because hashtag 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 was stronger, smarter and better than he was before he was stupid, weak and not good enough. But now he was better than ever. Hashtag 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 didn't even lose his face in the fight with All Might like he thought. It was as handsome as it was before, and it was all thanks to Izuku, who always told him his mistakes and his plans, and made them even better. Izuku was always meant to have a family, even if he didn't want it. Hashtag 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 will bring the family together. It doesn't matter if he has to bring Yoichi from the dead. Hashtag 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 let a sickening smile make its way on his face, and then he let out quiet chuckles. Yes, hashtag 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 will do his best in the plan he has. Izuku was walking out of the shower, but then he felt a shiver go down his spine, and he started to glance every way he could see. Maybe someone was thinking about him at the moment. But nobody knows him in this century, and even if they did, why would they think about someone as old as Izuku? Maybe they have a daddy KNK? Izuku snorted loudly as he looked at himself in the mirror. He did not have the body or the face to be considered a daddy, maybe a Pefli then. As long as they take no booty pictures, Izuku has no problem with it. Izuku himself is a bit old. And in his time he was considered a beady, even if his parents did kick him out at 16, because he was considered a person who can live on his own. Izuku was glad about his beady then, because people pay for fake dates when they don't want friends to make blind dates. Izuku has chosen the perfect age, it's 19 to 24 years old, because Izuku knows nobody older will date him, and nobody younger will like a guy. But if time changes, does that mean people changed too? Izuku will figure that out some other day. He has other things to think about today, and more things to even do each day coming day. Nedzu had questioned about why Midoriya had called him a stoatling, but what he found under really deeply hidden things, was that a stoat lives a long life, and they're considered a stoatling for many years. Nedzu had thought he was an adult for 30 years already, and this is why he gets excited when something that interested him happens. It's because he's a really young stoatling still. Nedzu finally knows what it feels like to guest eye on his life, because he just found out the biggest secret he could find. Nedzu sat in his chair quietly as he questioned his life, because what happened to make him think that he was an adult? Was it that he was smart, or because he was an experiment? Nedzu doesn't know, should he? Ask Midoriya. Nezu shook his head slightly, and then pushed a button on the computer's keyboard to delete the thing he just read, because as long as nobody else knows, Nezu will be alright and nobody can say anything about being young. Nezu let a crazed smile make its way on his face, and he didn't have the energy to hide it, because now he knows even more about things others don't know about yet. Izuku felt another shiver go down his spine, and this time his eye twitched, because why does he have these problems? Why could nobody else have them? Izuku just wants to rest the rest of the day, and that he will do. Izuku laid down on the bed again, but this time he knew that he would not get up the next morning, because there is no way he would get up for a normal coffee after living without it for two centuries. Izuku closed his eyes, and fell into a deep slumber. Izuku went to sleep early, but he did not get up early at all. He slept till it was time school would end, and it did end, because this is a school he is living in. Izuku was laying on his bed tiredly, and got up after half an hour, because someone made time go faster than it should, and Izuku needed more time in a day. Izuku was still tired, and he had been gone for centuries. He is lazy. Izuku looked into the mirror he was about to pass, but stayed to really look at himself. Izuku had white hair, but somehow it had a green tint to it. His eyes were more light green and his pupils were white, and his freckles looked more pale, his whole body looked pale. Izuku still had all his war scars, but they looked more hideable than before. Izuku passed the mirror when his thoughts came to, I look like the FNG Shigaraki brothers, and decided that he wanted to have the coffee that he really didn't like to drink. Does he have to commit crimes to get fricking cappuccino? Izuku had passed two of the teachers already, but didn't know what to say to them, so he just walked past them slowly and tiredly. The two didn't even bother Izuku like Izuku had thought. Izuku looked at the coffee machine when he was about to use it, and stopped his doings when he noticed that is not a coffee machine Izuku has used before, and it doesn't even look like one. How the F do I use this? Izuku asked Butterfly, who was standing in a corner of the room drinking a coffee like it was going to be the last. The man looked at Izuku with a look that asked, really? Izuku hardened his stare when the man didn't help him, and the man came to help Izuku with the machine. Okay, look, it isn't Izuku's fault people thought making coffee machines different than before was a good idea. The young adult showed Izuku how to use the machine, but all Izuku can think is that this is not a machine, that is a called magic in my time. A coffee machine should not be that complex. At least Izuku got his own coffee now, but he will still need help with the thing. Izuku could care less if he was some kind of genius, his thinking does not go down that land, it goes down its own land. Izuku drank his coffee slowly down the drain that is his throat, because what else is he supposed to do now? Izuku has nothing in this time, maybe, expect his bank account that is years old and has money in it, a lot of money in it. Money. Izuku can do anything with the money, because the money and those things look the same. Nothing about money has changed after so many years, thank the money lords. Izuku was about to speed into his room, but got stopped by the Stotling, who was just about to step through the door. Izuku looked down to the Stotling, and the other was shaking his head sideways. Izuku nodded and followed the Stotling. They walked in a silent hallway towards the Stotling's office, and then stepped into the room together and sat down on their seats. Stotling on the principal's chair, and Izuku on the soft sofa in the corner of the room. Izuku was silent after Stotling explained him that he had to come up with a new name, not his real name or even the one Yoichi had come up for him, because he was known in both names. He didn't exactly hide who he was when he went around to places. And then he had to take a test to get out of school, and maybe even get a teacher degree, because the Stotling wants him as a teacher assistant in his school, and Izuku doesn't exactly want to decline. So now he's sitting in the Stotling's office, waiting to come up with a name for himself. Michael Loud? Izuku asked the principal, and the Stotling shook his head sideways, because that is an English name, and they are in Japan. Izuku looked at the ceiling and thought, and then it was as if a switch was changed. What about Yukimaru Izuku? Izuku asked excitedly, and the Stotling felt like it was good enough, because it was Japanese name, but somehow it felt like it had a meaning. It did, but the Stotling didn't need to know about it. That sounds okay. Stotling answered Izuku, who looked like heaven was about to take him, because he just got Naruto and Avatar into his name. How cool is that? If Izuku one day dies, he hopes that'll be his name, and not Midoriya Izuku, or even the one Yoichi came up with. Or the family name he married into. Izuku was 27 years old and he just married Yoichi and ################################################################################ because they had to evade taxes somehow, even if they didn't pay for taxes. Okay, they married because they had a time off, and that's rare, they just got bored fast. They all took the Shigaraki last name, because Yoichi thought it was a good idea, and that it would PSS off his brother. Izuku was all in when he heard that. Their marriage party was a small one, but when Yoichi's brother heard about Yoichi being married, the guy almost went crazy, and then he did go crazy when he saw Izuku on the altar with the other two. Izuku doesn't understand why. They had to run away again, but Yoichi was caught after a week had gone past. Izuku felt like it was his fault, because Yoichi's brother never liked him to begin. Izuku still doesn't know why the man didn't like him. Izuku was always so nice to him and Yoichi. He had almost felt like he had married Yoichi the first time they met, because it felt like the man gave him the shovel talk. Their marriage was a happy event. Izuku had cried that day because it was so sweet. He thinks every one of them had shed a tear. They had been bored when they came up with the idea, but it ended with so many feelings. Izuku shook the memory off as he looked at the Stotling while was staring at him with barely hidden confusion. Izuku felt something go down his face. Was Izuku crying? Sorry, just remembered something. Izuku told the Stotling when he himself noticed he was crying. He really thought that the Midoriya tears would go away when he was kicked out by his parents. No, it is okay, memories are like that. The Stotling said to Izuku, who was wiping his tears away with his hands. Izuku smiled softly. I know how memories work, they just always bring up something I wouldn't want to think about. Izuku answered the Stotling, who had become more silent so Izuku could put himself together. It took a second for Izuku to bring himself to put it together, but when he did it was as if it never happened. Izuku loved the two dearly and he would show it many times. He would kiss them if they asked, he would do what they asked, but Izuku could never get over them. But he still can date others and do the dirty. Izuku knows his husbands could care less if he slept around, but if he married someone else. Izuku was dead meat. Even if the two were 6 feet below now, he could never survive their rampage. It had been about 2 weeks when Izuku could finally get his teacher degree, but he got it. Then he had a talk with the Stotling, and he got the job with the name of Yukimaru Izuku. Izuku was Butterfly's assistant and he took the job gracefully, because now he has a lot of work to do, even if he wasn't in on anything. Izuku was just so cool to have involved with everything. That was a lie. Izuku was so bored he had to be tied down to a pole that was outside. He was tied with duct tape, ropes and, is that a lock dash? So not going to lie, Izuku had a boring life going on, and he was even more bored at all times. It wasn't Izuku's fault he was still 16 mentally. He just doesn't grow up like a normal person, and that's one of the things he's glad about. Izuku was introduced to the whole school the next year, and people even liked him. They did tend to ask about Izuku's age, but Izuku just lied and said he was too old for them. Maybe he can exclude the third year's dash. He can't exclude the third year's dash. Every teacher said those words to Izuku, and he went pouting to his room, because that ain't fair. Those guys are hot. And some girls too, but they said something about, Izuku you are 2G-. And then a teacher would pop up from nowhere and stop them from continuing. It was Izuku's third year in U.A and he has had it. The students started to call him a kawaii-sensei, and it was only because people disappeared when they said something about them doing bad, and maybe it was Izuku's fault, but now they were 6 feet under, where they belong. Izuku's new name was Koyoi-sensei, because he was scary and nice at the same time, and Izuku liked it more than Yukimaru-sensei, Yuki-sensei, or Kawaii-sensei. People aren't good at names, and probably never will be. It was about time when the first third years that Izuku had known for 3 years were going to leave. He was really sad about it, because those kids were like his own kids by this time. Izuku got a gift from the class. it was a cup that read. Kawaii-sensei. Izuku had given the class a disappointed stare, but smiled kindly after and gave each of the kid a bye hug. The next year the same happened, but Izuku already knew how he would feel, so he just received the gift. It was hair clip. He put it in his hair right away. They told him that it would never get off when they had got their hugs, and ran off like cowards. Izuku couldn't even give them a disappointed stare. Izuku got a disappointed stare from his colleagues, but he did try to take it off. It didn't get off, and when he asked Machine Hedgehog, Power Loader, he said it literally wouldn't get off if he didn't cut his hair, and he would never do that except when it gets too long. When Izuku had spent 5 years at the school, he was told that All Might would be a teacher there in a year. Izuku had whistled with an interested look on his face. And all the students have stopped asking for his age. Izuku was so happy to know that these kids gave up faster than any of his older ones. Did the generation start to get more confident? People change so fast but so slow at the same time. And Izuku had a man to meet one of these days, and to name like any other person he's ever met. Izuku will never give up his naming skills, even if they are worse than a dying seagull. Izuku had been awake the whole night, because he had to grade students' works. Butterfly had given Izuku extra work cause he was causing ruckus around the campus. It wasn't Izuku's fault, he was excited about new students and a teacher. But at the same time, it is Izuku's fault. Izuku himself has always been a chaotic person. Even though the person was of high value, he goes around places without getting caught, and Izuku gets away with things more easier than others. When Izuku had graded everything he was given, he looked at the time, and it shoved that it was about 7 a.m. Izuku still had some time before he has to go with the other teachers to meet with number 1 hero. He was so excited about that. Izuku has never met the man, or even spoken to him before, and Izuku just never bothered with the hero things. Izuku was in the teacher's common room, because he hadn't bothered to buy himself a place to live in, and to play some harmless pranks on the others that lived on the campus, being Space Kitty, N.13, Anin, Therapy Dog, Hound Dog, Inui, Butterfly, Eraserhead, Shoyuta, Loud Cockatoo, Present Mike, Hizashi. This guy has many nicknames. And Stotling, Nedzu. Izuku had been allowed cappuccino, even though everyone still thinks it's a drag. Expect Butterfly, who Izuku shares the coffee with without nobody knowing. They have been drinking together for 3 years. And then Stotling, who had known since Izuku had left the building to do something illegal, without telling him what he was going to do. It took Izuku 2 months to crack without the coffee he liked. Izuku saw Butterfly enter the room, and passed him a cup of his special cappuccino mix. When Izuku is tired, he assumes that others are tired as well, because at the times he's tired, Izuku remembers other people need coffee to drink too. Here you go, Butterfly. Izuku tries to say with the energy Loud Cockatoo has almost all the time, and ultimately fails at it. The other only grunts as a thank you, and Izuku sighs as he drinks his cappuccino. Long night? The older-looking one asks as he hides his smile in his capture scarf. Izuku only gives him the stink eye, and then Cockatoo walks into the room like a bright sunshine. The two gulp down their coffees fastly, and do a little wince cause of the burn in their mouths. Izuku took Butterfly's cup and made his way to where he could wash the 2 cups, because he needs to unburn his mouth. That's why he left the other under the bus. Shoyuta looked at Zuko. They don't call him Izuku, because that could raise suspicion. Walk away fastly in what could be called betrayal, because Shoyuta knows the other could handle the burn better than him, but Zuko left him to speak with Hizashi. Gee, good morning. Shoyuta said to the loud blonde with a hoarse voice, because it burns in his throat, and now he has to speak with the most extroverted person in the common rooms. Morning, Shoyuta. Shuta's extroverted husband gave him a quick peck to the cheek, and then made his way to a cabinet, because even Hizashi drinks coffee for breakfast, and eats. Unlike Shoyuta, who drinks the coffee he got from Zuko. And then Hizashi started to speak like he usually does. Shuta's answers were noises of listening, because his throat is still burning. He will seriously go after Zuko after his throat feels better. Zuko came out of the kitchen after a few minutes, and gave Shoyuta a pitying look. Shoyuta flipped Zuko off when Hizashi was looking the other way. The other gave him a look that said gasp dramatically. Shoyuta flipped him off again, and the other left the room like a teenager throwing a tantrum at his parents. Shoyuta snorted quietly at the thought he had, and then started his morning like any other he has, which is by being around Hizashi, or trying to sleep in his sleeping bag. It was hours later that every teacher was called to the principal's office, and they all arrived there on time. The first thing Izuku noticed was All Might in his skeleton-like form. Izuku didn't mention it to anyone when they walked into the room, he thought everyone already knew what he knew. "I think you're all wondering what you're doing here today. So let me explain," Stotling said as he saw everyone who was in the room, and then it was like a story was told to all of the teachers, because the skeleton poofed and then a puff man was before them. All Might smiled like he did in all the posters and TVs Izuku had seen him in, but the room was quiet as they tried to make sense of the knowledge that just arrived in their brains. And Izuku realizes the man was like all the comics Izuku had read before. He was puff, big, he had a big weakness and he acted like an oaf. Izuku figured he would act like a confused puppy all the time, so this person is his new favorite living thing. Izuku's last was a bug before he left to leave. Izuku approached the man with a shy smile, and then he offered the man his hand. It's nice to meet you sir, please call me Wayukamaru. Izuku talked to the man shyly, and the puff man got smaller as he shook Izuku's hand. Don't bother with Honorix, just call me Toshinori, Yukamaru-kun. The skeleton-like man said enthusiastically to Izuku, and he almost cringed at the added kun, but rather smiled shyly again, and then made his way back to his usual seat. Nedzu thought that Izuku, yes, Nedzu is the only one to call him that, and it took almost 2 years, was about to laugh at the top hero, but he certainly did not expect to see Izuku flushing shyly as he spoke to Toshinori. Izuku didn't even notice the shock that was going around the room when he didn't even smack the hero in front of him for adding kun to his name. Nedzu himself got the scariest stare down in the world, and the others? Izuku smacked them and beat them up without a second look. So yes, Nedzu was jealous of the man that is standing in front of him, because it took a long time for Nedzu to get Izuku to open up, and this man Izuku had never met before. Izuku just put his trust in him without a second glance. Nedzu could feel the thoughts of unfairness going in his old students' minds, and this time Nedzu felt ashamed of himself for acting as selfish as he is now, because it really isn't fair. Shoyuta thought that Zuko was going to leave the room when he stood up, but what the white-haired genius did was horrific to Shoyuta, because Zuko had always acted cold towards new people when he met them, even the students who were young. But no, the white-haired genius looked at All Might like he hung the stars, and that hurt something inside of Shoyuta. Was this how it felt to be rejected by someone you've known for years? Because it did not feel good at all, it was like the Oboro accident happened again. Shoyuta is seriously going to destroy Zuko after this, because his throat doesn't hurt anymore, and he feels so cheated on at the moment, like what they did together meant nothing to Zuko at all. It was the 3rd year of Zuko working at U.A, and at the moment he is bothering Shoyuta with a mug that had Zuko's first ever nickname written on it. Shoyuta had enough after the smaller one didn't leave after talking for at least 30 minutes. So Shoyuta chose to show Zuko his own mug. It had a picture of the whole class on it, and there was written a Yoryu-sensei, because Kawaii-sensei is always in the way. The other gasped loudly, and then started to complain to Shoyuta about unfair students, and how they should respect teachers more. Shoyuta had to agree on that part, but Zuko didn't need to know. And Shoyuta remembers that day well, just because Zuko had been so happy to receive a parting gift from his students. Zuko never gave a gift back to anyone who gave him something, because something about giftless orphans. Shoyuta didn't ask for more after that. It didn't take long for people to introduce themselves to the number 1 hero, and then leave the room in shock, or with the feeling of unfairness that Shoyuta always says doesn't exist. Maybe fairness does exist, but that doesn't change the way Shoyuta will start the school year. When the meeting ended, all of the teachers knew that All Might was going to teach heroics. He was Zuko's favorite, and that absolutely nobody liked him, because he just walked into the school like he had been there for years, and acted familiar with every one of the staff. At first they thought that Nedzu was the white-haired genius's favorite, but that's nothing to what Zuko is acting like now, because the youngest-looking one of the staff is acting like a person meeting their idol for the first time in their life. And almost nobody in the staff liked it, because it really took long to get Zuko's trust, and now it's in the hands of an oaf. Even Recovery Girl doesn't like where things are going, and she's the oldest of the staff. Nezu looks like he's planning something big, and the staff are being around thinking about the unfairness of the situation. Nezu is planning on how to get rid of All Might, and it needs a lot of thinking about, because the man is #1 hero, and has a lot of fans, money and other things you can think of. When Izuku had walked back to his seat, it felt as if the whole room went down in how warm there was, because almost everyone was looking at Toshinori-san with what Izuku will call unfairness. Izuku didn't get the people in the room, or the mammal sitting on his seat while watching everyone in the room. Izuku had taught the mammal to look through situations, so he knew who would be feeling what, and he had taught the stoatling a little too well it looks like, because the small mammal is tense as they speak about things that are going to happen this year, and going on. When the meeting ended, Izuku left fastly, because he saw the look Butterfly sent him when Izuku had looked his way at all. The look promised that there would be running. Izuku lost their tussle. When it was about 1 p.m., Izuku had been around the campus looking for Toshinori-san, because he wants to get to know the man better, and the man looked like a nice person, he just couldn't find him anywhere. And once in a while one of his friends would ask for his help, even as they didn't even need Izuku's help, maybe they were lonely, because they were alone. Izuku was on the roof of the school, and he was watching down to the ground, because there were so many students down there, and none of them looked like the people he knew in his time, the people who Izuku knew were running from war, commission and from being killed. The door to the roof opened silently, and Izuku knew it was Butterfly by how the man walked. Butterfly walked from the door to stand behind Izuku, and then he sat down there, on the dirty roof with Izuku. The two have some kind of problems for real, because nobody likes to sit on dirty things. "What's up?" Izuku asked the tired-looking man as he started to swing his legs on the edge. The man only sighed tiredly at the non-formal way of speaking, because what did he expect from this? "Nothing, just a student said that someone was going to jump off the roof." Butterfly answered Izuku's question truthfully, because there really was a student running into the classroom shouting about suicide. Butterfly had left the room fastly. "Okay. That's all?" Butterfly asked Izuku with confusion written on his face, because usually Izuku would start acting all dramatic, and then pull off a theater kid act. Yes, the staff know about stuff of Izuku's year now, and they will never forget the classes Izuku gave them. "Oh no, I'm just getting started," Izuku said as a sadistic smile made its way on his face. Butterfly shuddered at the smile. It was too close to the one Izuku did when he did something that left people traumatized. Izuku dropped his sadistic smile off his face and got up from the roof floor. Butterfly looked at him with a calculative look, and then Izuku sprinted to the other side of the roof and jumped as he said the magical words to Butterfly. Shoyuta didn't know what to think when he saw Izuku on the roof, because he thought it really was going to be a student about to jump off of the top hero school. He sat down next to Izuku and spoke with him a little. It hadn't even been 10 minutes, and the other got a sadistic look on his face. It dropped after a couple of seconds, and then Izuku got up to do something. Shoyuta started to record immediately after that, because it could only mean that he was going to do something traumatic to Shoyuta. Every one of the staff have a little camera attached to their person, it can pick up sounds. Izuku ran fastly to the other side of the roof, and then he jumped right in front of Shuta's eyes. "Goodbye, Shoyuta," the white-haired adult said to Shoyuta with a sad smile in his face, and Shuta's eyes widened as he sent his capture weapon to catch Izuku. It didn't touch anything. Izuku. Izuku knew what falling felt like, but he could never explain how good it felt, or how it felt to let all his problems just be, as he feel at a speed that felt fast, but so slow at the same time. It was as if he was falling into the arms of everyone and everything he loved, but at the same time it felt so scary, because it could mean he was falling into the arms of hell. Well, he couldn't care less even if he did. Izuku has lived a fulfilled life already, and it has lasted for centuries too, but hearing Butterfly shouting his fake name sounding so destroyed, he felt really bad about pulling off a prank like this. Izuku used his meta ability Quirk when he was just about to hit the ground, and then appeared behind a clear-eyed Butterfly. He placed his hand on the other's shoulder assuringly. "Yes, Butterfly?" Izuku asked, his tone questioning. Butterfly's eyes widened as he looked over his shoulder at Izuku. Izuku gulped with a scared look on his face when he saw Butterfly getting ready to come at him. Welp, Izuku guesses he's dead now. Nezu was having a hard time trying to get rid of All Might, because he was a faculty member just because the HPSC had forced him onto Nezu, and it's hard to do anything about the HPSC without having bad consequences. Now he was sitting in his chair while looking at a beat-up Izuku. He knows it's because he had pranked Aizawa-kun much worse than he would have usually, and Izuku pranks Aizawa-kun once a week to once a month. What did you want, Stotling? Izuku asked Nezu while twirling his small curls with his fingers. Izuku had grown his hair as long as Aizawa-kun's. Its curls looked more like Aizawa-kun's too, but Izuku's curls were more clear, if that's a word. I wanted to know if you knew how to get rid of a high-profile hero commission. As Nezu said commission, Izuku tensed more than he had in years. Nezu knew this, cause Izuku never tensed. Commission. Izuku said the word with an unrecognizable feeling in his voice. Nezu was confused by the reaction, and he let it shiv on his face, because yes, the commission. Hero Public Safety Commission, why? Nezu asked as he said the full name. Izuku looked more shocked by the second. Had Nezu not told about the commission to Izuku, because he remembers that he had told something. Izuku let out a bitter laugh at the name, because that's what they caught themselves now. Even after all these years, there is still a existing commission being run by the bosses of the heroes. First they wanted to get rid of meta quirks, and now they are the boss of every single hero, and they control how they do their thing. How much they get money, when they work, with who they work, and much more they can get away with. When do you want it gone? Izuku asked the Stotling with rage written on his face. He couldn't care less how scared the little one was at the moment. Izuku was too angry to control his feelings. It didn't take long for Izuku to calm down, and when he did, the little Stotling answered his question truthfully. Izuku smiled evilly at the answer, because it was just what Izuku wanted to hear. It was about a week before the entrance exam for the normal people, but it was the recommendation exam the next day, and Izuku was going through every name, because there was only a small amount of people who were recommended. Todoroki Shudo. Real Zuko, he even has the same look in his eyes. Yayorozu Momo, creator of the world, or just creator. She has a creation met Quirk. And then all of the other people. Izuku tried to remember their names, but he just stopped trying when he saw the list, because there was almost nobody this year. Last year there was even a little more than this. Izuku huffed as he rolled his eyes, because these young students did not have permission to look so hot, and Izuku was denied dating any of the students by the Stotling. He will find the most hottest person to sleep with soon. Izuku can feel it in his old bones, or his young bones that didn't let him grow through his PBRTY when he had it. Shoyuta was not over the prank Zuko did on him, and he knows he never will. He will seriously talk to his therapist about his worries when he has the time, which is in a month or so. But at this moment, Shoyuta is just watching as Zuko is sitting in his chair with more anger written on his face than has in years. Could Shoyuta even say that? He has never seen him angry. All he hopes at the moment is that he is not involved in whatever Zuko is doing, because he looks really serious at the moment. Izuku could feel that someone was feeling what he was feeling, and that feeling was looking through cameras to find a hot single man to sleep with, because Izuku has so much bent up in him. Izuku finally remembered what he was going to do originally, and that was to speak with Toshinori-san, who is in the teacher's room thingy. TOS dash. Izuku was just about to say the man's name, but got interrupted by someone else. Zuko, can you help me with this assignment? Loud Cockatoo asked as his brows burrowed with the look of. I'm so sorry that I interrupted you, but I really need help. Of course I can help, you just have to ask. Izuku said as he moved over to the Loud Cockatoo, who sat back down when he saw Izuku come over to him, because what was a man to do if a friend needed help with an assignment? It took the two about an hour to get it ready, because the one who made the assignment really wanted to make it hard to the one solving it, because the assignment was like staring at one of the tests from Izuku's time. The thought made Izuku's body shudder, because that sheet was hard to do in his time, and Izuku knows how to do it only because he had so much time in his metaquirk. Thank you so much, Zuko. Loud Parakeet, yes, Izuku does change the nicknames, said as he smiled at Izuku brightly. Izuku doesn't know how a man who threatened the crowd is so sunshine looking. Sometimes Izuku wishes that he had that bright look in his eyes, but when he did have the bright look it just scared others, because somewhy he had started to smile like Yoichi and his brother, and those guys had a family line of creepy smiles. Izuku had not been there when the entrance exam was, and he was upset about it, because he really wanted to choose his favorite of the first years. He had just lost his 3rd years with Butterfly, and the kids always make their way to his heart. Sometimes Izuku wishes he could age like them, just so they couldn't leave him behind one day. Izuku had lost many people in the past already. But that is not the case here, because right now he's pouting in the teacher's common room thingy, because some Wainetsu thought the school should have a rooming for teachers, but not for students who could have a bad time trying to get to school, like Izuku had been in a school, and the mornings were always horrible. School is one of the reasons that Izuku drink caffeinated drinks, and the others are because life was hard when quirks came to existence, like Izuku ran from the commission, and got married to war criminals. Izuku shook his head to stop his thoughts from going back to memory land, and started to pout like a child, because they really just kicked him out of the observation room, and said, "You're going to make things go boom," and even if it isn't a lie, they could have just tied him up. Izuku was sitting on the couch in the common room, and then Butterfly entered the room with a cup of coffee in his hand. If the man is going to try and bribe Izuku with it, it's not going to be enough. Izuku would take the bribe if it was Toshinori-san offering, because the man can do no wrong. Izuku knows this from how much he got to hang out with the man, and the older man was like a puppy. Even if Izuku's favorite was a cat. Butterfly sighed deeply as he sat down next to Izuku, and then laid down there. His head was now close to Izuku's left leg, and Izuku was staring at him. "Are you sick?" Izuku asked as he scooted away from Butterfly, "'cause if he is, Izuku does not want to get sick after not being sick in centuries." Butterfly sighed again, this time he sounded more tired. "Are you tired?" Izuku asked the tired-looking man, and the other only closed his eyes. "I can be used as a pillow. Or so students have told me." Izuku added to his first sentence. The man's eyes snapped open fastly as he stared at Izuku with a disturbed look. "Not like that. I was forced to become your assistant, because I couldn't keep my cool with the older students." Izuku explained to the man, because he couldn't control the hormones of his body, and no, his first years who graduated with him do not count. Butterfly looked even more disturbed now, and yeah, Izuku made it sound like he was a big pervert, and is that so far from the truth really? After that, the afternoon was spent with Izuku trying to explain himself to Butterfly, and the other cheering himself mentally, because now the younger-looking one wasn't pouting all the time. You would expect a genius to figure it out immediately, but nobody needs to know that Izuku knew from the beginning. He's just used to making people underestimate him. Izuku does it without realizing. It was the first day of the school year, and Izuku was excited for it to begin. That's why he has made himself a cappuccino, and Butterfly too, because it is an early day, and it's going to last long. Izuku greeted Butterfly, who walked into the kitchen tiredly. The man really needed to put his work times together. He wouldn't look, or be as tired if he did. Butterfly only raised his hand in a way that said, "Are you going to give it, or is there nothing?" Izuku chuckled softly at the hand motion, and gave the cup to the man. "Had a long night?" Izuku asked with loud cockatoo in his mind, because the two men have been together for about 3 years now, and that's only because Izuku pushed them into a closet, and locked the door, literally. It was finally one of the days that Butterfly had gotten enough sleep that Izuku was confident enough to do it, and to ask what, he meant lock his precious friends in a huge closet which had all the things they need to set up the mood. Which meant there was lube, condoms, toys, music, and other things too, but the most important one. It's that Izuku had gotten made himself meta-ability erasing serum thingy. Izuku got the two into the closet by saying it was a surprise. It didn't work on Butterfly, but it did work on blonde Parakeet easily. He just had to tie his eyes up, and then spin him around the place a bit, and then start his way to the closet in a place Izuku will not tell it is in, for safety reasons. Loud Blonde didn't take it well when he got the eye blinds off, and Izuku didn't think he would in the first place, so he left as early as he arrived. Butterfly was a whole new thing, because the man didn't trust him one bit with his life, so Izuku did the most reasonable thing, and punked him in the head with something that wouldn't make him head problems. Izuku got him into the room easily, he just had to throw Butterfly at Loud Cockatoo at a fast speed, and then lock the door behind himself again. Neither of them was happy about it when Butterfly woke up. Izuku should have tied the man's mouth with something, because now the Loud Blonde was mad at him, so Izuku did the logical thing and opened the cabinets with the power of technology. The two weren't so mad about it for long. If the noise they were making was to be talked about, it was a good thing Izuku made the walls soundproof. He just wishes he didn't know that Butterfly was a loud bottom. And yeah, maybe Butterfly did beat him up after they got out, but it was a win-win situation to both of them. Izuku shook off the memory so he could know Butterfly's answer, because he did not want to think about SEC right now. Izuku has been thinking about it too much these days. And the only answer Izuku got from the other was a grunt, and that told really much of the night that happened just that night. Sometimes Izuku is so jealous of his colleagues. Maybe he should go into a bar. Then he could find a person who only wants a one-night stand, because Izuku ain't looking for a lover after losing his two husbands in the past. And before he starts to spiral into memories, Izuku slams his head against the table, which makes Butterfly JRK in surprise, and the table shake 'cause of the power. Butterfly didn't ask anything, because Izuku sent him a look that promised murder for questions. The other teachers started to enter the kitchen for their morning routines. Shoyuta and Zuko were walking next to each other. Zuko just had a little jump in his steps, and Shoyuta couldn't do anything besides sigh at the sight before his eyes. Zuko only giggled like a crazy high school girl. Shoyuta doesn't even know how they're walking next to each other, because the jump in Zuko's steps should give him some kind of speed, but it doesn't give anything to him. When the two arrive at the door, Zuko opens the door before Shoyuta can, like he has done every year since becoming an assistant to Shoyuta. Even if the man does teach most of their classes. Before Zuko says his famous first words in front of the class, his whole body freezes in its spot in front of the door, and his eyes widen in what will be called sadness. And when Shoyuta is about to ask him if he was alright, he plinks back to reality, and lets Shoyuta do his thing. Is this year a curse, or is something bad about to happen this year? Is all Shoyuta can think about, because first it was All Might, and the idle stare, then there was the prank Zuko pulled on Shoyuta, and now there was someone in Shuta's class that gave Zuko a reaction like this? Is Zuko going through a phase in his life, or is this the year something bad is going to happen, because Zuko has never acted like this before, and if he has it's in front of Nezu for sure. When Izuku saw the teen who looked almost exactly like his husband, but with the wrong colored hair, he almost burst into tears right there, right away, because Izuku didn't know he missed his husbands this much. Maybe it was the last time he saw his other husband that hit differently, because the last time he saw him was when the building collapsed in between the two, and his husband was left alone to battle against the commission people. And the last time Izuku saw his other husband? And he's going to think about that at a later date, because Izuku will not have a breakdown in front of his future student. When Butterfly finally let the students leave, Izuku almost let himself burst into tears and weep like a baby, but some why he hates himself, and goes to the meeting the Stotling wanted to have with him. Nezu knew something was wrong with Izuku when he arrived at the office looking like he had just been reminded of something of the past, and Nezu doesn't like the look on Izuku's face when that happens. Izuku just starts looking like he lost something he would have died for, and Nezu, he doesn't like the feelings that mix up in Izuku's body language, eyes, and the way he will be wary about being around people until he's over the things again. So Nezu does the first thing that was important to learn. He asks questions about Izuku, and if he gets answers he knows that Izuku trusts him, and if he doesn't, he starts to put his walls up again. Tell me Izuku, what made you so sad today? Nezu asks the man carefully, but with his usual chipper voice. Izuku looks up with the most regretful look on his face. It's mixed up with so much love, sadness, loneliness, and the most beautiful emotion Nezu has ever seen on a Izuku's, because that's what it is, Izuku's emotion face, the feeling no one almost never accepted, acceptance. Butterfly's class has a student who looks like my old husband. Izuku answered Nezu's question, and maybe Nezu feels a little guilty for asking information about Izuku when he's in such a fragile state, but it isn't like Izuku will ever know. And I didn't think I would get so emotional. Izuku said with a sad chuckle as he wiped his eyes out of any tears. Nezu feels sorry for Izuku, because the man had lost his past life. Even if it wasn't that great, Nezu knows what it feels like to make memories, and then your memories will only be memories. Nezu let Izuku rant about his life when he was in the past, and he didn't feel like he could give any advice for Izuku, nor does he think anyone else could, because the past he lived was full of many things, but what it didn't have was enough freedom of living on his own. Nezu may sound a little selfish, but he doesn't think anyone can help Izuku as good as he himself could, because Nezu himself had a dark past, maybe not as dark as Izuku's, but if Izuku went to a therapist now, it would bring more harm to the therapist, and no good for Izuku. Should Nezu himself go to therapy? Izuku knew the moment he woke up, that the day that he was going to have today, was going to SCK so much that he would rather sleep in, and say that his alarm didn't go off when he was asked why he wasn't working. Because the feeling of someone making a big mistake today is as bad as to make Izuku want to involve himself in it, and Izuku hates to write people's mistakes, cause then he wasn't the one to make it. And then that would mean, Izuku couldn't make the mistake of himself. It's much funnier when he makes mistakes, cause then the others don't get into trouble. But there still are times when he doesn't take the blame, like when the mistake is a small thing, and not a mind-blowing one. Izuku likes the mind-blowing ones much better. Mind-blowing means that it will make things feel more at home, like when he saw a new teacher being scolded by an older teacher, because they had made the biggest mistake of the school in a week they had spent in the school. It was fun seeing a teacher running after a teacher while shouting, "Betreka! Come back here," while the younger teacher ran with the most scared look on their face. Izuku and his classmates had laughed their butts off that day, because they did not know that Ms. Goru could run that fast. She looked like a gorilla that had gone through parenting, but realized that she hadn't parented her child the right way. And now Izuku knows that it's Toshinori-san that made the mistake. He doesn't know how to feel about that. The man had already become like an emotional support puppy to Izuku. Izuku doesn't like when teachers make mistakes with students, because then the teacher would have made a mistake in teaching things to the children that are still students, and still take the words of an adult to their hearts. Which is through and through utter bullshit to Izuku. He's just saying the words that someone had said to him at some point in his life, he doesn't know from where, but the words were not wise. But Izuku should consider getting up now. He has been laying on his bed thinking about life meaning, and he still hasn't found it, except if the answer is which Izuku knows is not true, but he still had to quote it after he had thought about it. When Shoyuta entered the teacher's common room, he was met with a sad-looking Toshinori sitting in his skeletal form as he looked at the floor, and Izuku with a cold look on his face as he scolded the man about something doing with class. And all he could think about the situation was, Zuko finally gave up on the man, but that thought spun around when Zuko started to comfort the other with kind words. Now Shoyuta was jealous shocked, because Zuko has never forgiven after he scolded someone. He would give a cold look if someone asked for an apology, and say the exact same words to everyone, "Life isn't forgiving, now is it?" And if someone wouldn't stop there he would add to his first sentence, "Then you should fix your mistake, it hasn't gone too long, so it's still easy to fix." Not the nicest way of apologizing, but it's as far as anyone has gotten. And here Toshinori was sitting with a sad smile as he was handed something nobody can get a hold of, and received the best comfort Zuko has ever given anyone. The man has known Zuko for a week. And all comfort Shoyuta ever got from the young-looking man was an uncomfortable pat on the shoulder. The best comfort anyone has gotten from Zuko was a gentle smile and a hand going through the hair. So yes, Shoyuta was really jealous shocked by this show of affection towards the skeleton-looking man, and while Shoyuta is still complaining about life, why doesn't he say everything? The man was a literal skeleton, with the mind of a buffoon. And he doesn't even have a teacher's license for the life of Shoyuta. 1 cat. 2 cat. 3 cat. It didn't take long for Shoyuta to calm himself down, but if he was anyone else on the staff, he knew one of them would have made the most hurt look possible, because they had literally known Zuko the longest of all. Hisashi would have screamed at Zuko the loudest he could, because whatever Zuko had done for all of them wasn't enough to gain his gentleness. They had accepted the young-looking man with open arms, and all they get is a man full of pranks, jokes, and other cruel things anyone could write down. And when Zuko himself was having a mental breakdown, he wouldn't come out of his room for at least a week or two, because some why the man doesn't want others around when it happens, or doesn't trust them enough to handle it. And when Zuko comes back from his mental breakdown, he just acts like it never even happened, and nobody still knows if it's him really having a mental breakdown, or if he's just taking a break from people. They just walked along with mental breakdown, because when the man came back from it, he was thinner, more tired, would flinch at explode sounds, and Zuko would keep his pranks more nicer than cruel. The staff didn't like it when Zuko was sad, he just acted more like a man who had no return. It took a couple of days until he was his normal self again, and when he was, the staff knew they could be more cruel back. When Izuku had found Toshinori-san, he had asked about the class plan he had made, and the answer to all of Izuku's problems made itself clear. It was the class plan Toshinori-san had made. It was literally a plan to make students fight each others without proper training first, and all Izuku could do was stare at the paper that had bullshit written on it. Izuku sighed as he rubbed the bridge of his nose, and then rested his cold disappointed stare on Toshinori-san. The man recoiled back with a hard flinch. It made Izuku even more disappointed at the man, because he knew that the man was a buffoon. Izuku just didn't know how big of a buffoon, now he knows. Toshinori-san, I cannot accept this plan. Izuku said to the man truthfully, because the man needs to know how to fix his own mistakes before he makes them. When the man was about to defend himself, Izuku shushed him. It's a plan to make untrained children fight each other. This is a plan that you would give to a third year, and maybe not even that. Izuku explained the man with cold facts, because Izuku was not making children into soldiers for the Hero Commission. And before somebody asks, Izuku will bring it down, even if it was the last thing he did. He was not going to let the Hero Commission control the future heroes. Izuku himself was going to train. Izuku sighed deeply as he stared at the older-looking man with a disappointed look, only to see the man staring at the floor sadly like a kicked puppy. Oh my lord. I am so sorry, Toshinori-san. Izuku apologized the man with gentleness as he crouched down in front of the other. I should have explained it better. You are a new teacher. Izuku tried to come up with words to make the other feel comforted. But when he started to look at the man again, the blonde man was giving him a sad smile, and now Izuku was dumbfounded, because this man has some mood swings. Oh, it's all right, young Yukimaru, I was a little disappointed in my skill to understand the meaning of your words. The blonde answered Izuku's words with kindness showing through his almost blinding smile, because this man had a bright smile. And Izuku almost shoved his fist in the man's face, or even almost attacked the man without permission. Izuku couldn't stand how people could give him such informal way of determining him. In other words, he wished to punch the man in his face repeatedly, and only stop when the pulse was almost non-there, or even in shorter words, Izuku wished to murder the man. He could, but B will not do so. The man was important to the world, and he was Izuku's emotional support puppy, even if Izuku preferred cats over dogs. Shoyuta could feel Zuko trying to keep himself back from murdering the number one hero, and he realized he should save the life of Toshinori, but if he did, then they couldn't get rid of him, but at the same time he could get Zuko's attention away from the buffoon. He has decided to step in on the two-man's talk. If you can say it's a talk with the way Toshinori is talking animatedly, and Zuko is trying to keep his track of not murdering anyone in a year or so. They don't talk about it. Zuko, I need your assistance with the file. Shoyuta said when he had walked over to the two men who were speaking. Zuko turned around and let a smug smile on his face. So, now you need my help? Izuku asked Shoyuta with a smug voice, and Shuta's left eye twitched anuyodly at the smugness, because couldn't the man have an ounce of dignity? Shoyuta sighed as he turned around, and started to walk away from the two. Zuko followed after him when a couple of seconds passed by, and then they were walking side by side in the hallway. Hashtag was finally done with all of his plans, and really, did All Might still think that his face was gone, or think he died in their battle of quirks, or whatever it was that they fought for. But he shouldn't think about it now. He had a break day from his villain work, and Tamura had grown into how could one say it? A tantrum-throwing man-child. Hashtag doesn't know how it happened, but it could have been all of the manipulation he was using to convince that their target was All Might and not Izuku, his only existence of the time that happened. Hashtag had wished many times to just up and leave the plans, so he could just take Izuku to his new home, and talk to him after such a long time. It had been centuries ago when they last saw each other's. And the last time they saw the other was not so pretty, if one could describe it like that. Hashtag was leading his army of people to attack the people who denied his way of seeing things, and he happened to see Izuku his brought, for leading the people going against the commission. It wasn't too small of a team, but it wasn't big enough either. Now that he really looked at Izuku, the young adult still doesn't look older than last time he saw him. How long has it been since Izuku aged? Because hashtag doesn't think people age that slowly. Izuku was in his late 40s or was it 50s, he couldn't really remember that well. All hashtag wanted after Yoichi died was to destroy everything that got in his way of peace. He wanted back the quirk his little brother made, and then gave it to someone else to hold on to. When Yoichi had died it was nowhere good. The city around the place where he died was destroyed beyond fixing. Hashtag had gone crazy that day, and now he was just moving along the way. But he could feel some of his familial love coming out of him when he saw Izuku. He really couldn't help it. The first time he met Izuku was decades ago, and it was such a silly way of meeting too. Then he had gotten attached fastly, and if anyone wanted someone to blame, it would be Yoichi. His little brother wanted to help the young adult at the time, and hashtag was still thinking clearly at the time, so he agreed to it easily. Now all hashtag can think about is, how didn't I notice it before? Because he clearly had learned things from Izuku when they were still living together, and Izuku had learned some things from him. If someone looked at the two standing side by side, they would believe they were even brothers, and wasn't that a thought? A good thought, a thought that he liked to think about even. Hashtag stared the way he knew Izuku was, and moved. It wasn't a good last time, but it was a really big battle of quirk wars, and it ended up with almost half of the city destroyed, but hashtag still couldn't catch Izuku, not even when he was using almost all of his power. Now that he thought about it. Hashtag should make some quirk erasing cuffs, because he couldn't have Izuku disappearing from existence for centuries again. It would be too much waiting for hashtag smiled as he moved to go into the lab again. He couldn't care less if it was a break day. He needed to have a thought-out plan to capture Izuku, and not have the other escaping right away. Izuku knew he should have been more gentle with the students, but he really can't. Their costumes had zero protection on them, and they were more made for flashiness and famousness. And Izuku cared more about his students' lives than their famousness, so he sent some of the students to make themselves better costumes for heroics, even if he will be looking them over to see if they finally have some protection. That's why he's seated in his desk in the teacher's lounge, even if he much rather would be sleeping, or pranking one of his colleagues to tears, and he loves when they end up in tears, even if he hates it when he makes them scared of him, or what he would do next. Izuku will never tell them that was a lie, because then they really would be scared of him, and Izuku can't really have that, even if he loves the feeling of power he has when he scares them. Namiri didn't know if it was a good idea, or a bad idea to ask Zuko to come with the others to a bar to party, because they haven't had the time to go partying anymore. The last time was when they were 28 years old, and that was 2 years ago. And they couldn't ask Zuko that year, because Nezu had taken Zuko to himself that day, cause even he had the 3-day break like the other teachers, and that time was amazing. Shoyuta and Hizashi had returned the day after the party, and they looked like they spent a week in a war of some kind. Shoyuta was grunting and shaking on his feet, Hizashi was tired and keeping his hands on Shoyuta for the whole day. Namiri still has evidence that it really happened. She really had to take pictures of the day. She even had pictures of her dancing with multiple people. There were women, men and non-binary people, but she doesn't know how she didn't end up in bed with anyone that day. Zuko had looked so confused by their antics that day, because all of the three were acting as if they were dead on their feet. Even if Namiri did laugh and make fun of everyone, she was still sitting more, and being more quiet with her voice. Namiri has chosen her choice, and it is to ask Zuko to come partying with the three. Now she just has to get Shouts to agree to partying, because it would be boring without him there. Now she just has to figure out if Zuko has any good clothing, cause all she has seen on the man was pretty much the same clothes every day, like he was the #1 copying Shoyuta. Zuko literally wears the same black pants as Shoyuta, he just has a shirt that has a smiley face on it, and sometimes the face can get really disturbing to look at, even if it is literally a smiley face. And then the pink cat hair clip that's stuck in his hair, it is cute, but it not getting off is annoying. Like when Zuko gets angry, it's literally smiling at the person that gets the scolding, it's not funny anymore after that. Izuku doesn't know if he has a quirk to sensing that something is going to happen, or if it's just his life that gave him the sense to survive another day, because he knows he's had the ability to sense that something is going to happen for as long as he remembers. Now he just wants to know what's going to happen in the next hour or so, cause then he knows how to respond to the thing that's going to happen to him, or the people around him. That's why he's staring at his room's door with a glare, because nothing has happened yet, and it has been at least half an hour, and that's far too long. Izuku started to glare at the door with as much strength as a parent who lost their child, and is on a war path for revenge, cause they couldn't stand the feeling they got after they lost their child. And Izuku really should stop thinking if he wants to know if someone is getting closer to his room, and if they have the aura of malice, or if they just have a question Izuku hasn't heard in years. Maybe Izuku is just making things up, so he would get over his trauma, or then he's not making anything up, and is right, and waiting for someone to knock on his door, and ask. As Izuku continued to wait in silence, he finally could feel the presence of another human being close, and not it only being his imagination, he knows, cause he pinched himself. And just before the person could knock, Izuku opened the door with an excited look on his face, because he was going insane in that room, and not hearing from the thing that had a question. Izuku looked up with a smile on his face, and into Sleepy Kitty's eyes, who had a look of shock on her face, but the two didn't need to acknowledge it, they had much more important things to do. What is it? Izuku asked the woman who stood in front of him, and then pet his head to the side in a questioning manner. I wanted to ask if you wanted to go partying with me, Hizashi and Shoyuta. Sleepy Kitty tried to say excitedly, but her voice said it all. She was nervous, didn't know if Izuku would at yes, and she really wanted him to come with them. Just party, or is it a bar? Izuku asked with a high-pitched voice, because really? He hadn't gotten to drink alcohol in so long. And now he's invited to partying with the trio? A bar. Sleepy Kitty said as excited as Izuku now, and Izuku couldn't be more happy, cause he's invited to partying, and he has the perfect clothes for it too. When? In about 20 minutes. Sleepy Kitty said happily, and then turned around to make her way to her room to change her clothes, and Izuku knows this only because he knows which way her room is. Now Izuku has to put on his party clothes, and this will all turn out great, no pranks, and no playing around, expect maybe ladies and gentlemen. Shoyuta doesn't know why he accepted the invite to a party with Namiri and Hizashi, but now he can't help but be glad that he did, because right now everything would be so much different if Zuko wasn't there with the three. And by that he means, the three would have spent the first half and out together, and then they would be drunk and do what they needed to do, and it was good that none of them were recognizing out of their heroic costumes. Because the clothes on the four are so different to the other, cause Namiri has a red dress on with a black jacket on it, Hizashi has his normal out-of-costume clothes, Shoyuta has his normal homeless look on him, and Zuko? Zuko has skin-tight black pants with the dark glowing paint on them. There are so many different artist-like paint on the pants, that even Shoutout can't count them. He has a shirt that's color is hot pink and it has the words hot written in black on it, and if he raises his hands the shirt goes beyond his belly button, and shows his skinny figure. Shoutout didn't even know that Zuko had that small of a waist. He almost looks like he was fragile. His black jacket is as short as the shirt, but it's on the corner of Zuko's shoulder on the other side. And he has a black choker on his neck, and it's black too. And then his shoulder-length hair is in a pretty pun, that even Nemori doesn't know how to do. It's like he's trying to find a person to hook up with. Shoutout can't even tell how much he wants to throw his big, baggy coat on him, and now he can't even say that he doesn't have some kind of parental instincts, because this man is trying to get Shoutout to throw him into the car, and then driving back to the school. And now Zashi is looking at him all weird. Shoutout doesn't want to be here when Zuko is trying to woo someone into a bed, and then having a long night with them. Shouda's thoughts cut off when he sat down, and he finally realized it was too late to get anyone to back up from the plan Nemuri had, and now he has to be here when Zuko is trying to woo someone, and he doesn't even know if Zuko likes women or men. Why is Shoutout even trying anymore? He can't travel in time, or even try to do that. Izuku was so happy at the moment, he could care less about the looks Butterfly was giving him, but he really wanted to get drunk, and start dancing with people who want to dance with him. When finally the alcohol entered the table the four were at, Izuku took one bottle to himself and ignored the shocked looks from his colleagues, because he couldn't care less how small of a alcohol stomach they had. Izuku himself could drink 2 bottles alone. Izuku didn't look anyone in the eyes as he opened the bottle, and started to drink it. He started slowly to get used to the taste, and then drank the whole bottle down alone. The stares he got from his colleagues were hilarious. At first someone was trying to get the bottle from him, but Izuku just gave them an unimpressed stare, and took off the bottle from his mouth. And said the exact words next. "I can handle a bottle or 2 alone, thank you very much." And then took a big sip from the bottle again, even if his colleagues still had untrusting looks on their faces. Izuku knew Sleepy Kitty was drunk when she left the 3 alone in the table, and decided he was tipsy enough to go onto the dance floor too, even if his head was mostly still clear. Butterfly looked like he had to be held down to not get him back, and then just leave the bar already, but it looked like what Loud Parakeet said was enough for him to stop. And now Izuku had to thank the musical bird tomorrow, because he knew always how to get Butterfly off his butt, and Izuku was always glad about it. Izuku was going around the dance floor trying to find a dance partner, but any different lady he came to looked at him, and then said something about a softie, and when he tried any different kind of gentleman, they either said something about gays, not their type, or then that he looked too weak to handle them. And Izuku doesn't really have any evidence to counter them, expect the gay. He has said many times that he was gay, but really, he was only gay when he was in his teens. Now he can try to woo many different kind of people. He doesn't think many people know that, but he can't blame them. They haven't known him at all yet, and if they did, he doesn't know if they would stay that long. When Izuku was about to move towards another person, he felt someone's hands on his waist, so either the person was a man, or then a person who tops. Izuku happily let the person lead their dance, because even if Izuku did know how to dance, he really likes it when someone else leads him in a dance. It means he can let himself relax, and let the person take the lead. So when the person started to move the 2 along the music, and stared to let his hands move around Izuku's body, Izuku gladly started to let his own hands move with the person and music. Izuku doesn't know when it happened, but at some point the alcohol finally took effect in his body, and the 2's bodies started to make their way out of the bar, and to somewhere Izuku doesn't know. Kigo doesn't know what pulled his eyes towards the white-haired man all the time in the bar, but his almost drunk self decided it was the best timing to bounce towards the target when the man was about to approach another person. And if the willingness of letting Kigo do the leading? Kigo felt like he finally met someone who would be enough to keep up with him, because their dancing speed was on a good speed for Kigo, and Kigo moves fastly. He was the fastest hero. And if the stares they got as they moved around was something to talk about. The white-haired beauty was on another level when it was to taking the lead, but Kigo didn't let the man lead too long, cause Kigo really wanted to lead at the moment, and almost every man he always approaches think he's a bottom, even the ones that look like a bottom. The two danced with grace, gentleness, and beauty, and when someone's eyes even landed on the two it was like watching a professional dancer in a bar. But when Kigo felt the man's steps start to get wobbly, and hands more slower in movement, he realized that the voice in his head was begging for more, walk, move, don't be obvious, don't let go. And before Kigo knew it, he was leading the obviously drunk Kigo himself was drunk, but it wasn't as obvious man out of the bar, and towards his apartment he had gotten to get alone time from the hero commission, and let himself take a week break from hero work. The next time Kigo blinked, he really had a beauty under him, and looking at Kigo with a look that begged for more. And Kigo wasn't one to decline such a beautiful way of begging. When Shoyuta woke up the next day, he knew it would be hard to get up from the warmth of his bed, and do anything that would mean moving, and if the look on his lover's face was talking, it would be saying, "My head, show. My head." In a voice filled with pain. Now he needs to make sure Namuri and Zuko are okay, even if he really doesn't want to get up from the warmth of his lover's arms, and the bed. Shoyuta should try to remember if they went to the school at the same time, or if they came at different times into the teacher's dorm system. Shoyuta sighed in a pained way, that even his asleep lover winced at the sound, and, wait a moment. His lover winced. Shoyuta looked at his lover who was not sleeping like Shoyuta had thought, and was looking at Shoyuta with a look that said, "I know something you don't." And now Shoyuta was anxious. Because if Hisashi remembered something, it would only mean it was something he wishes he didn't see happen, or didn't wish to remember what he heard happen, and now Shoyuta wishes Zuko and Namuri are at their rooms. Shoyuta is staring at his husband with the anxiety of a parent, and his lover is trying to not look at Shoyuta, and that is making Shoyuta even more stressed than he was already, because what happened that Shoyuta doesn't remember. All Shoyuta remembered is entering the bar, drinking in the bar. Seeing Zuko in revealing clothes, getting all of his parental instincts awake, drinking more, seeing Zuko trying to woo people into dancing with him, and getting rejected all the time, drinking more, then a man dancing with Zuko finally, drinking more, and then Hisashi and he had gotten horny and left. Zuko was wooed by someone, and it wasn't Zuko doing the wooing. Shuta's eyes widened in realization, and Hisashi grunted from how fast Shoyuta got up from laying, and before anyone could blink in the room, Shoyuta was already in random pants and running towards Zuko's room, because somewhy the young-looking man didn't want his room close to other people. And when he got there, there was no breathing, or a sound of someone sleeping in the room. Shuta's bit his bottom lip, and went back to the room he shared with his husband, because he didn't even know who Zuko left with. Maybe he should ask help from the rat, and then ground Zuko for at least 2 weeks, and then put him on paperwork duty for 3 days. Shoyuta could care less that Zuko was older, because the way he's acting, it's saying something else. Hisashi hadn't woken up long before Shoyuta, but when he did, he remembered everything that happened the night before, and he was disappointed in himself, because he just left Zuko with a man who he didn't even know. Hisashi was a bad person, and there would be no other way to describe him anymore, except maybe how students describe him in class, or to other people they know. But those don't matter if it's Shoyuta they're talking about. Hisashi's husband went feral when his parental instincts were messed with, and by feral, he meant feral. You don't mess with a feral Shoyuta, or a Nezu who went on a spree of sadistic, because those two are the people on top of the list of the most dangerous things alive, and no other thing could get past them. Oh, how Hisashi was doomed to death, and by his own husband too. Like how bad could life get anymore? It would be worse if Shoyuta did die, or anyone in that matter. Hisashi's grip on Shoyuta tightened a little, and the other grumbled in his sleep. Hisashi couldn't help but smile lovingly at the man in his arms. And said man woke up to the way Hisashi was holding him. Hisashi isn't ready to die yet. And now he just shortened his lifespan. Oh gosh. When Izuku woke up from his sleep, he knew the second that everything was wrong. And there are at least many reasons to that, but Izuku will not start counting them at all, because right now he's in shock. Because he was relaxed for the first time in 5 years. Izuku never let himself relax, it would be too dangerous in the new environment, and that was the first thing that hit him. Then when he finally put all of his senses into work, he knew that he was naked, there was something dry slimy thing on him, there was a person cuddling his back, and their hands were around Izuku's waist really close to his PP, Izuku's hair was laying messily around him, he felt as sore as he felt after training for 10 to 12 hours straight, and the person behind him is much stronger than Izuku. And Izuku really isn't that strong, he never really was, he was more used to running, and going through tight places, that's why his body is on the smaller side than the bigger, and there are many times that he's glad about it. But at the moment he really should process the way things were, because if he didn't, he would start to spiral into other thoughts like he would usually, and then it would take longer for him to get out of the situation he had gotten himself in. That's why Izuku is trying to go to the moment he got drunk, and then go further from that, because Izuku some why always remembers things when he was drunk if he tries. It could be another side effect of his meta ability, but he's not sure yet. Izuku was dancing in the bar with the blonde-haired man who had some kind of wing mutation, and he was starting to feel a little faint in his head, so he let the man take full control of the dance, and lead the two as he liked. That must have been the first mistake. And it wasn't long after that Izuku started to get more wobbly on his feet and his hand movements started to get more slower. The man must have taken that as a sign to get out of other people's sight. Because it wasn't long after that Izuku found himself being held against the wall gently, and next to the back door out of the bar, and then the hands that had been on his waist were on his butt, and the face of the man was on his neck. Izuku shivered involuntarily as the man sked at his skin, and when the man bit down on it with strength Izuku let out a quiet groan. The bite turned more gentle after about 5 seconds, and then the mouth that had bit him was on Izuku's mouth. Now Izuku's head was against the wall with the man absolutely devouring his mouth, if the clang of teeth was something to talk about, and the way their tongues fought for dominance. Izuku had given up when the man had pressed his leg against Izuku's PP that was already half hard from the way they were advancing. Izuku doesn't know how they ended up in the man's apartment, but he really wasn't paying attention to anything at all. Expect the hands grpng him, the lips of the man kissing his neck, lips, and sometimes leaving some hickeys after leaving the old spot. It was soon after that Izuku's back of the legs hit the end of the bed, and then he fell onto the bed with a little push coming from the man. Izuku wasn't sure if he was bottoming, or topping, but the way the man was treating Izuku was that of a top, so Izuku just let the man do his work. Izuku's shirt was gone after the man had tried to get his mouth lower on Izuku's body, and it went flying somewhere into the room, so Izuku let the man leave his attention on Izuku for the rest of taking off clothes. It wasn't long after that the two were naked on the bed, and Izuku's legs were on Kigo's shoulders as he started to try and eat Izuku out. It didn't work with how tense Izuku had trained his body to be at all times. Kigo lowered Izuku's legs back on the bed, and then stared at Izuku like he was battling something inside of himself, before looking like he had come to a conclusion. Said conclusion was to overwhelm Izuku's body with touches, kissed, bites, and taking care of his PP gently so he wouldn't come. Izuku could say that this day was the most overwhelmed he had been in centuries, because it did take the man what felt like forever to get Izuku's whole body to untense after years of training it. To be tense, and ready for any kind of an attack to happen. And all of that hard work for nothing. For one human he was about to have SEC with, to get him to let all of his worries for someone else to deal with. Izuku was getting weak. When Izuku for the first time was about to come, he was denied strongly, and it made Izuku's whole body give up on him, and flop down on the bed with a cry of F-. Kigo only let out a delighted chirp as he preened in his victory against Izuku's body, and that made Izuku realize that this man had fought against his primary instincts the time Izuku had been tense. But if Kigo let out a chirp, it could only mean he had let his bird instincts in control in on accident when he had felt the joy of victory, and then his instincts had chosen that moment to finally strike. Izuku didn't know if it was good, or was it bad, because the way Kigo was acting at the moment was not the moment Izuku had all of his thoughts straight, because Kigo had made him untense one way, or the other. At a later date Izuku chose it was the bad, because Kigo didn't have mercy at all, or then he took notice of any reactions Izuku made while he was F-ed on the bed for God knows how long. What Izuku will never probably know, is that Kigo had gotten back in control when he had hit 10 Izuku in his PRSTT the way that made Izuku beg for more, and his eyes roll into the back of his head. What Izuku will think of this memory is that, he has had SEC only 7 times in his life, and all of them were before he was even 20 years old. It was probably why he let the man lead the way so much, and why Izuku tried to mimic the others' movements. And if he is thinking about it now, he has slept with 3 girls, 3 times with one guy who bottomed all the time, and then there was the one time that doesn't really count as SEC, but Izuku will not let his husband's lives go dying as versions. Even if it was a one-time thing, and even if they had to run almost right after it, that's all the reason he will say about their SEC life, because they did have one. It was only really short, and really unromantic. And yes, this was his first time bottoming. He didn't think it would feel so relaxing after your head has no thoughts at all, and you're just miming curse words, and sometimes letting out really Pawn Star-like sounds. He will not think about how Kigo looked at him with a predatory look as he found another way to make Izuku believe he would be the only one to make Izuku feel so great as he bottomed. And if Izuku now talks so much to himself, he really hadn't tried to have SEC with anyone these days, he hadn't really wanted to feel like a Pefli, or a child MLSTR, but looks like thoughts change when you're drunk, and horny. Wait a second. He didn't feel like a Pefli, or even a child MLSTR, that is not the way he wanted to word himself, and now he sounds like a real MLSTR, and that's just bad. When Izuku tried to move out of Kigo's arms, he finally felt the PP inside of him, and collapsed back into his place in Kigo's arms with wide eyes, and a pink flush on his face. He finally remembered what the dry slimy thing was, and now that he really tried to get a real touch of what his body condition was, and it was then that he realized that Kigo really had given into his bird instincts, because Izuku is pretty sure the man tried to pre-ed Izuku. And Izuku has a male body, so he must have tried more harder than usual. That must be the reason Izuku felt like if he was to stand up he would fall the moment he even tried to step. Oh, how doomed Izuku is. Namuri didn't think that Zuko really could have pulled off as a one-night stand kind of a man, but the way she saw the number 3 hero, Hawks make Zuko into a bottom, and a person that would follow in step with other people. She really didn't think anything else. Namuri was only blinking her eyes in shock as she rolled the memory again and again in her head, because the way the man had almost made Zuko fall on his feet, and let Hawks do what he wanted with him, and as long as he wanted. She wasn't too far off, but she would never know anyway. Maybe Namuri should ask for some kind of lessons with Zuko, because the man could make anyone want him with a little change of personality, and the man could change himself to be to the likings of other people. That was how he made himself to 10 whole UA's staff. Maybe Namuri should rest some more, because she clearly wasn't thinking about things straight. Izuku had gotten out of Kigo's house after some time, to be specific, almost an hour, and he was feeling as if he would die if he took any more steps on his baby deer legs, because his legs were finally wobbling under him. They were so wobbly that some people he passed gave him strange looks, and it felt like he was in a 2020 film that told what bullying felt like to people, but it was real life, and they were judging his SEC life. And Izuku didn't even have that much of a SEC life. He almost never had the time to have fun, and when he did he would come up with work he had to do, just so he didn't have to go out to see all the hot people. Izuku was close to a bench that was in a park, and he let out a sigh after he took another step with his wobbly butt legs. Oh, how he wanted someone to help his old bones to get to the bench. But no, all people did was look at him, then at his legs that shook under the weight he put on them, and they turned around to walk away from him, or then they just passed him really fastly that Izuku had no time to even ask for help. Izuku glared at the bench that was about 10 steps away, and then decided that life could F off, and he was going to use his meta ability. Izuku didn't know how long distances he could teleport, but all he thought about was his dorm room at the teacher's dorms. Because all he wanted to do at the moment, was to lay down and get up when he felt the soreness leave his body. Izuku hated how he couldn't take simple steps at the moment. When Izuku opened his eyes again, he was met with his dorm room, and he almost let himself fall to the ground with a happy cry, because he didn't have to move no more. But that thought went away when he heard his room's door slam open, and he was left alone to stare at a mad butterfly, who was looking at Izuku standing there as his legs shook under him. Oh! Izuku had forgotten that Butterfly didn't like it when he didn't follow directions, and the man had clearly said that Izuku shouldn't end up sleeping with anyone, because then Izuku would get to be grounded, even if he said that he was far older than any one of them. Even the Stotling had said that Izuku should be punished if he ever ignored his warnings he got when he was outside of UA, because he quite literally didn't still know how the world worked, or how he was supposed to answer to serious questions. There were many times that Izuku hated his immortality, and one of the reasons is that he still gets punished if he does something he wasn't supposed to do. And that he has to wait, because it quite literally is a grounding. Izuku had never been grounded before in his life, because his parents literally let him live his life the way he wanted, and his life ended up being in the far future. His parents should have done a better job at raising him. He didn't even have good manners towards people at higher priority lists, because he quite literally had always made fun of them, and they all always knew that was the way he coped with life. Expect the people that he has met now. Because these people don't know any words Izuku say to them, it's like speaking another language to them, but it's the same language, and it just sounds different to their ears. Izuku sometimes hates how selfish he had been when he was younger, because he had left everyone he loved behind. Does he mean the corpses of them, and went into hiding alone? He even left his rat there. Izuku left the rat that did no wrong alone in his white bad stupid butt looking room he was locked in for all the time. He almost went crazy in the room. The rat, and yes, it literally was a rat, it wasn't even his imagination, was his only reason to live. Okay, he really pulled that out of his butt, because the rat had died after it had been in the room with Izuku for a week. Izuku still doesn't know what killed it. Maybe the people that experimented on him put poison in the room when Izuku slept. Izuku was brought out of his thoughts by something pushing his hip, making him take a step away and groan, and that made him fall to the floor with a yelp when he forgot that he quite literally couldn't do that. Izuku landed on his butt, and let out a pained groan again, and that was 'cause he had put a cum plug up his arse when he was leaving, because he didn't want to face his problems. Because it seems that it doesn't matter where he is, the consequence will always bite him in the butt. And before Izuku knew, he had lied down on the floor as he tried to not move his lower body as much, because who knew it would be so sore after having SEC? Izuku thought that the man and the women he had dated was just being overdramatic, and he was, because at least Izuku didn't complain about the soreness. The man had always complained about being in pain, and going to have to be carried around. And as much as Izuku was feeling the small way, there was no way Izuku was about to start and say things about being carried around, because then he really would be showing too much weakness to people. There was another push at his hip, and Izuku let out a pained noise as he came out of his thoughts, and faced the not as angry as before Butterfly, who was staring at him with a raised brow. Izuku just let out a hiss, because the man, and his stupid heroic heart, Izuku could take care of himself. Thank you really much. When Shoyuta had checked Zuko's room again after the second time going there, he heard a thump come from the room, and he was going back into it already, because if it was Zuko, that man was going to be grounded for at least a week. Shoyuta slammed the door open, and what he saw was the opposite of what he thought, because he really had thought that Zuko was a top from the way the man flirted with people, but looks like those spoke false. Because right in front of him was a wobbly-legged Zuko, who looked like he would rather be asleep, or dead at the moment, and Shoyuta had felt the same way when he first time had SEC with Hisashi. And all that could mean, was that Zuko had just bottomed for the first time in his centuries-old life, or then for the first time after centuries had passed, but if he looked at Zuko right, Shoyuta knew that the man had just bottomed for the first time in his life. Shoyuta will never tell anyone, but the first time he had met Zuko, he had thought the man was a bottom. But when he took notice of the other's SEC life, the man walked like he was normally the one to take control in the bed. It didn't take long for Shoyuta to realize that both of them had gone into the world of thinking, and when he did realize it, he just walked over to the thinking man, and pushed his hip. Zuko let out a groan at the push, and then he tried to move away, but he just dropped to the ground with a yelp, and Shouts quite literally realized how Zuko's legs imitated the ones of a baby deer trying to walk for the first time. And when the man hit the ground he left out a pained sound, and lied down on the floor like he was ready to die on spot, but Shoyuta still had the scolding part to do of this conversation. They didn't even start yet. When Zuko finally looked up at Shoyuta, he just raised an eyebrow, and the other hissed at him like an angry cat, and Shoyuta could see the resemblance now that he thought about it. Are you going to lay there, or get up so I can scold you? Shoyuta asked after a while of silence, and the way Shoyuta said the words seemed to make Zuko mad. I did no wrong, it was the alcohol in my system. Zuko stated like it was important, but it really wasn't that important. Nobody ever gets drunk these days, because they always have work to do, or then they just live their lives like a normal person. Do you really think I'm about to believe that? Shoyuta asked the man who looked like his younger brother that Shoyuta doesn't have, but nobody needed to know that. Yes. Because it is the truth. Zuko said like it was true, and maybe it was, but Shoyuta really felt like Zuko needed to know the dangers of the future world, because men could easily get PRGN if a right quirk was used. It seemed like Shoyuta had said that out loud, because Zuko was looking at him with wide eyes, and looking ready to start listing off how wrong that was. And yeah, that's one of the things that Shoyuta can agree with, because it quite literally made no sense that a man could give birth, they did not have the anatomy of a woman in them. But before Zuko could utter a word, Nezu came into the room to see Zuko laying on the floor with wide eyes, and a Shoyuta standing over him with bored eyes. It looked like Shoyuta was about to murder Zuko on the spot. But what they both knew, was that the rat could not know about Zuko's limping. The rat man would end up destroying the man Zuko had spent the night with, and in the most hurtful way possible. Shoyuta sent a look at Zuko, and the man seemed to see it. He just ignored it fully, and put his attention on Nezu completely, because that's what Zuko always does. Kigo woke up to an empty bed, and before he himself took notice of it, he was off the bed and looking around the apartment for his mate, because he doesn't know how his mate got out without Kigo noticing anything. Kigo wants his mate to be there when he's in such a bad state, and his mate was not there. He had even marked his mate, so others knew that he was someone else's. Kigo almost fled the apartment to look for his mate, but when he went into his room to put on clothes he was thinking straight enough to know he can't go outside naked. He finally noticed the letter on the bedside table. He picked up the letter with his feathers, and started to read the letter throughout, because he couldn't miss a single thing from it. He had to know where his mate was at. In the letter read, "Sorry that I left already, I had to get going, I have to get to work you know. Left a $50 bill there if you saw it. See ya, if we see again. Degree 3 degree from, Zuko, love." Kigo turned the letter around, and there really was a $50 bill there. He has never felt as dumbfounded as he felt at the moment, and wasn't the man's name Izuku? He remembered the man trying to tell his name, and when he did finally get it out, he had said the exact next words. "Why dash? I wasn't. Zuko. Zuko. Gasp fac, name." After that he just started to gasp, and with curses even Kigo didn't know. Kigo didn't want to be alone at the moment, he wanted his mate with him at the moment, and his mate had left Kigo alone without even a goodbye. And mates are supposed to stay together for the rest of their lives. Maybe Kigo's mate didn't know that. Or then his mate left because Kigo wasn't good enough. But dash. No. That wasn't possible. Kigo's mate couldn't be with anyone else anymore. Kigo had marked the other as his, and that meant if his mate tried to mark, or if someone tried to mark him, they couldn't, because Kigo's marking will last for the rest of his mate's life. It will leave a scar, so it will always have some of Kigo's scent. In the far far future Izuku will cut off his own flesh off, and then throw it into the trash as he walks around a park, but even more into the future he seems to figure out that cutting off his flesh didn't work, because Nezu had confessed all of his secrets to Izuku, so his memory would live on into the future with Izuku. And Izuku will be left all alone again, into a world that seems to hate him much more than he had originally thought, because he had lived to see all his new loved ones pass along. When Yagi had passed Yukimaru-kun's dorm room, he had seen Aizawa-kusan stand over him with an angry look, so the first rational thought was to go to Nezu-san, and tell him that Aizawa-san was about to murder one of his colleagues. This seemed to be a mistake, from how scared the two adults look when Nezu-san enters Yukimaru-kun's room with his usual smile on his face as he looks at Aizawa-san stand over Yukimaru-kun menacingly. Only Aizawa-san left the room, but the haunted look on the man's face spoke volumes to Yagi, and he knew from that moment onwards, that he shouldn't call Nezu-san when someone is murdering one of their colleagues. And when Nezu-san got out of the room, he looked more like he had just got fed a candy bar from one of his parents, and that the parent had said it was a secret from the other parent. It has been a few days since Izuku was drunk, and slept with someone. But it also feels like it had already been a year since it happened, because you really didn't think about it at all. And that was all because he was not looking for a lover. Lovers could kiss his butt and then be gone. Izuku had gotten married once, and that once is enough to last for his whole life, even if his life is never going to end by any means, and now he has to shut off that thought before it can evolve into much darker. ING to the USJ in 2 days. Zuko. Are you even listening to me? Those were the first words that Izuku heard, and by Butterfly too. Yep. We're going to bring the class to the USJ. Izuku wasn't sure if that was what Butterfly said, but it was pretty much what Butterfly would tell him, if they were going to go somewhere which was not the school. Good. I wasn't sure if you were listening, or if you were zoning off again. Now why would you think I zoned off? You make a far-away look, and then you stop smiling like usually. But right now we're talking about what we're going to do at the USJ. Butterfly added to Izuku's question, and then started to talk about their job again. Izuku isn't sure if the man knows that Izuku never listens when he speaks about work, but if he doesn't, then that's probably for the better, because Izuku always figures out a way to make him believe he had been listening to him talk about work. Izuku never listens. Shoyuta was watching Zuko as he continued speaking, and sighed inaudible as he saw that Zuko was once again not listening, and only pretending he was so he could say dream about whatever he did. But Shoyuta never did say anything to Zuko to make him listen. The man always knew how to help even if he hadn't been listening. Shoyuta is still trying to figure out how, but has no answers. Izuku was in a field filled with teenagers, and the 2 days Butterfly had been talking about had passed. He hadn't thought that they would go to the USJ so early, like these kids are, what? 14. 15. He himself isn't even sure. Izuku just knows that they're really young at the moment. Get in the bus. Izuku heard Butterfly say to the students, and then just followed the man into the bus and sat down next to him, because that's what he's been doing for the past 5 years. Butterfly, no need to be so mean to the kids. Izuku said in a whine-like voice, and before you say anything about, but you are the much more meaner teacher, Zuko. I am nicer, I just say things in a mean way. Izuku added when he saw Butterfly about to open his mouth. I wasn't going to say anything about that, Butterfly said in his own defense and then added, I was going to say that you will be helping me teach this year. Butterfly said in his, Nedzu but me up, not my choice. Voice. PFF- as if I would have anything to teach these kids. Izuku said in a joking way, because he had a lot he could teach to kids that don't understand war, or how a battle can turn out more bad than you thought. Butterfly only raised his right eyebrow, and then burrowed into his yellow sleeping bag to start eavesdropping on the teens while pretending to be asleep the whole journey. Izuku did no such thing, and just stared right at them trying to think of nicknames they would answer, because they knew it was their name from then on. Hitoshi could feel eyes on him, but he didn't even open his eyes to say to the other to stop staring, because he knew it was not one of his classmates, it was one of THR teachers at front. He felt the man, was it Eraserhead? Look at him for the next few minutes until he got tired of the looking, and opened his eyes to glare at the man for disturbing his rest. Hitoshi was staring at the eyes of Yukimaru-sensei who got a delighted look on his face when he glared at him, then sensei looked away and at Uraraka-kun. It wasn't Hitoshi's business, but he really wanted to know why sensei was staring at all the students with such a creepy look, because he looks like he's about to murder one of them, or then just all of them. Izuku could see that not a single student liked it when he stared at them, but he only got more excited when they looked away, because when they were adults and in spotlight, they would have to deal with it all the time. When Izuku felt something lean on his shoulder, he looked at Butterfly who was next to him, now really sleeping. He couldn't help but give the man the most disgusted look he had given anyone in a long time, because how dare he? Or you have a husband. He didn't even know why he was disgusted, just that he was. Izuku almost slammed the man off of him, but relented and only made him lay against the window slowly as to not wake him up. Izuku wasn't that cruel, not like in the past. Izuku was 27 years old, and he was out in the dark at night to watch out for the people who still were with him, or the only people still alive and with him. Izuku was outside looking out if any person was about to attack their temporary safe place, but so far there was no one and it was quiet. Too quiet for his comfort, and too quiet for it to mean safe. There would always have to be some sound, or it meant immediate death for them. They had learned that really fast. It hadn't been this quiet for 2 weeks, and that can only mean there is a predator, a commission worker with an army with them, or then Yoichi's brother who some why doesn't want to leave the 2 husbands of his alive. Because something had killed Yoichi when hashtag had taken him, and now he was probably blaming his 2 husbands who had married him, and had SEC with him. He probably thought one of them had some sickness, and had given it to Yoichi. Or then he was after them because they had took Yoichi from him, and then became war criminals with meta abilities. Expect not all had one, and some were just normal people who supported them. Izuku got up humming a tune. Was it called Yo Bro? He had heard the other day, and then as fast as he heard a rustle come from a bush, he shot with a gun he had found at one point in their teams moving around. Even he doesn't know when he found it, he just had it in his hand at one point, and then he just hid it in his pocket, because the gun was small enough to fit in it. There was a loud scream from the woman, and then Izuku heard feet, so many feet, too many feet to be safe. A commission worker was here with their army. Izuku ran towards the tents. Wake up! They're here. Izuku was pushed out of his thoughts when he felt the bus stop, and Butterfly stir awake next to him. He was fast on his feet and out of the bus with a little teleportation. He couldn't care less if someone noticed him teleport, he just had to get out of the bus before he attacked a student for daring to speaking to him when he was clearly upset about something. Izuku didn't notice it but he had started to hum the same tune he had in his memory. It didn't last long because people were finally starting to arrive where they were supposed to. When Shoyuta had stopped speaking to Zuko he had tried to eavesdrop on the new students, but all they spoke about was school, homework and asking others if they knew what they were going to be doing. So you could not blame him for getting bored of listening to them speaking like young children. It felt like people started to age younger and younger as the years went by, because Shoyuta had already been planning his whole life but then the plan had been crushed by none other than his husband, and he had frayed from the plan almost all the way. Shoyuta hadn't realized he had fallen asleep before he felt someone push him to lay the other way, and the other way being the window, so it must mean he had fallen asleep on Zuko. Zuko who hates physical touch, expect if it's violent, a tussle, or a hug he knew was coming. Shoyuta knew that Zuko couldn't stand it if someone fell asleep on him. And he knew the reason why, the reason being Zuko had gotten used to people sleeping in other places than him, and if they weren't sleeping in another place than where they were supposed to, and on Zuko, it meant that he had a dead body on him, or a person he had slept with the night before, or then a teen that was giving him a forever goodbye, because they wouldn't be returning to him again. Shoyuta got up from his seat, and made his way out of the bus so he could tell what they would be doing for the day, and how they would achieve it in a day's time, but sometimes they would have to make arrangements. Even if some students won't like them, but what is a teacher's job if not making your students miserable? Shoyuta smirked cruelly as he made his way to Zuko who was just standing in place, and waiting for everyone to arrive there. And if he too smiled like a villain? Then that was only Shuta's business. Izuku had made all the students perfect names, and they even suited the teens. He couldn't care less if they didn't like the names, there had been people like them before too. One student had even attacked Izuku for naming them, Pupu, and that name hadn't even been one of the bad ones. The child should have been proud to be named something so good. Like look at Floaty Bun. She has a worse name than they had had. Izuku would never understand why people didn't like to be renamed, because Izuku himself had changed his name many times already, and he hadn't complained about it even once. When Butterfly was about to start speaking about the plans he had made, a big purple portal started to form behind him and the student already started to ask questions. Why is it always Izuku? What has he done to deserve the words hate? Was it all the crimes he did in his life, or the people he murdered to stay alive himself? Or that he somehow got a meta ability that made him immortal? Maybe it's all of those reasons, or then the things that he never meant to do, like kill for the students when they told him something that someone had done to them. Okay, Izuku won't lie. He may be a little effed up in the head, but at least he's still smarter than any other living being, but still too dumb to understand other people's feelings. Yeah, he may have to shut up now, or all the time he had put up with students will fail him, because he really has no energy to deal with this bullshit now. He didn't get enough sleep last night. Should he just make a run for it while he can? Because he has never dealt with a villain attack before, and he doesn't know if he's allowed to kill anyone. He should probably ask Butterfly after he has killed the threat to the students, because then he can't blame it on Izuku, but on himself for not telling Izuku he can't kill anyone there. But at the same time they're villains. So they must deserve death. Ugh. Izuku will ask when he's done with the threat. Before any of the teachers said anything to the students, Izuku was already on someone's shoulders and twisting their head with strength he didn't know he had. The loud crack that came from the twist satisfied his murder dreams, because he hasn't been in a battle in literal years, and the last was a total disappointment. The guy hadn't lasted a minute before he was gone. Izuku disappeared from the person's shoulders and appeared behind a rather good-looking woman. Hello, beautiful. I haven't been in a fight, in like years. Izuku said cheerily as he wrapped his hands around the woman's neck, and squeezed. He heard as the woman let out a gasp, and then tried bringing her hands up to smack him off, but he just decided to appear in front of the woman and kick her in the ribs. Before the woman could as much as curse, and right in front of children too, Izuku stabbed the woman in her neck with a knife that had been in her back pocket. It seemed that after the two murders Izuku did right in front of everyone pushed people to start fighting, and do less talking and monologuing, to more shouting and using their meta abilities to fight literal children. And almost all of those were truly disappointing, or really interesting and dangerous to be handled by people who were clearly criminals without any money to help them live through life. Izuku really should consider giving money to homeless people that had no money, rather than laugh his butt off when they couldn't see him anymore, and that was really cruel from him already. It didn't take long for Izuku to realize he didn't have his own weapon, but it didn't really hinder his work that much, because he could just steal from the people that he attacked, or the ones that attacked him. And not many seemed to want to fight with him, even if he was literally so much better than Butterfly and Space Kitty. Now that he looked at the behaviors of the villains, they seemed to prefer one of the two much better than him. Izuku shrugged off his thoughts as he accidentally cut off one person's arm clean off, and then slit their throat before they could scream in pain, or horror of seeing their arm on the ground. Before Izuku could jump to fight another person, something solid wrapped around his waist and tried to pull him away, but he fastly just teleported behind a beaked monster. Now that he looked at the thing, it reminded him of something from his past. Probably just his brain playing with him again. It seemed to like doing it these days. Izuku doesn't know how to kill the DMN thing, because all the ways he tried so far ended up without results, so now he was just examining the bird thing with curiosity. The thing was huge with no clothing on. It probably wasn't even a human with its brain exposed like that. You could see the moment he realized how to kill the thing. Before Izuku could stab the thing's brain, someone with a raspy voice shouted with anger, "Catch the marshmallow." And then Izuku was in the bird's hand before he could even blink. So much for trying to figure out how the thing worked, when it seems to act like a servant that didn't have its own thoughts about things, or how to think about thoughts without a command. He figured out how the DMN thing worked in no time, and now he was just bored out of his mind, because he really has gone down with his wisdom, before he would have figured it out with only a glance at the thing. Now it took him several minutes. And with the help of a angsty teenager, no less. Shoutout has never been as shocked as he was now, and this shock somehow didn't even surprise him at all. Because he did expect Zuko to know how to fight, he just didn't expect him to kill people. Shoutout shook off his thoughts before he could be beaten with a bat, and used his capture weapon to slam the young adult to the ground with probably too much strength. He winced when he saw the blood on the ground start to move towards his feet, but then just scked it up and used a tall person's body to slam himself against another person who had been in a daze as they watched Zuko kill people. Shoyuta sighed when he saw the slightly insane look on Zuko's face, and then just pounced to fight people who were not occupied by anyone yet. The press after this would be so bad, and the commission was so going to attack Nezu for letting a staff member kill in front of first years in high school, that hadn't even been a month in school yet. A bad start for a bad year. Shoyuta sighed mournfully in his mind. When Shoyuta saw Zuko try to fight a man with a disturbing quirk, he tried to throw the other out of the fight, but Zuko just teleported away and out of his sight. Shoyuta will never admit it, but he had gotten so worried he may have started fighting more violently trying to find him, but only stopped when he saw Zuko just experiment on a beaked person. And he does know how wrong that sounded, but what was man to do when he had his own problems to deal with at the moment? Shuta's worries were soon diminished when he saw him trying to kill a beaked person, but then give up when it continued to renegade after everything he tried to do to it. Shoyuta kicked a woman's head so they would pass out of head damage and not death like every single one of Zuko's did. He really should worry why he doesn't care that Zuko was killing people. And then moved to a man who had tries to sneak up on him, but then he heard a person with a childish raspy voice shout, "Catch the marshmallow." And his attention was once more divided between fighting and listening. Then he saw who Marshmallow was, and something in him snapped in two pieces fastly, and he was trying to get to Zuko who seemed no more irritated than in pain. Shoyuta didn't really care if Zuko was in pain or not, but he needed to get him out of here now, because otherwise he may just break hero protocol and murder a ton of villains in cold blood. But he could use Endeavor as an example, and where he got the idea he could murder other human beings in cold blood, because that man seemed to get away with it a lot. After this is over, he will be having words with Zuko. Even if the other was not listening to a single word he said. Were the thoughts in Shuta's head before he was attacking people more viciously, because they were in his way to getting to Zuko faster. This whole battle might have woken up his stupid parental instincts, because they have been close to getting out of control before, now they were just going wild. He hopes no student get in his way, because Shoyuta is not beyond attacking students yet, and he probably isn't hiding that well either. Hitoshi couldn't believe what he was seeing with his young innocent eyes, he was seeing murder in first place and not even that far from the battle. Or could you call it a battle? It seemed like senseis were overestimating their enemies. He wants to go home and cry himself to sleep, because this definitely was not his hero dream at all. Hitoshi thought it would be just what Aizawa-sensei was doing, and not whatever Yukimaru-sensei was. Hitoshi looked away from where he saw blood flying out, and almost threw up right away when he saw that the blood almost reached them. He took couple of steps further away from the battle, and looked at his other classmates that were either pale in the face, already throwing up whatever they ate for breakfast. At this point he's glad his current family was abusive, or rocking themselves on the ground with wide eyes. The only ones who looked okay were Todoroki, Bakugo and Kaminari. Okay, what the hell was happening? Was Hitoshi dying or was B imagining things up? When Hitoshi blinked his eyes, AMD looked at Kaminari again. He saw a horrified look on his face as he stared at whatever was happening behind Hitoshi's back, because he had turned around to not see. And then Hitoshi realized he hadn't been the only one to back up from the blood that was on the ground, and realized he was almost in front of everyone. AMD then backed up behind a Todoroki who seemed to get ready for a fight. Oh God, if they were going to fight, Hitoshi was so going to switch schools. Were the thoughts in Hitoshi's head as he watched two of his classmates with a wary expression. Before any of the students did anything at all, many purple portals appeared under all of them, and they were all gone in different locations with different people of their class. And after that the whole fight became more violent, because all of the students were out of Fig Thing range and the teachers could apprehend the aggressors without traumatizing the students further. The teachers chose when the students were gone, that they should take it more seriously, so no student would die in the process of the attack. But as the fight escalated from small to a full-on murder spree, so did the teachers' energy start to go to zero. When students started to arrive back at the main part, all they could see was two of their teachers lying heavily wounded, and one teacher trying to attend to their wounds, and All Might fighting off the rest of the villains. Every single student of the class returned without much harm done to them, and with a story to tell the media of how the attack had gone from not so violent, to such a horrifying scene to see. When Tamura had snatched the marshmallow, he hadn't thought that Eraserhead would get such a huge buff up, and start destroying his minions like they were mere flies. He had just tried to get the marshmallow because Sensei wanted to have him to himself, he just hadn't thought that even All Might would show up to protect the marshmallow. To Tamura the marshmallow looked just like a person he had met before somewhere, but nothing too important to remember, but he couldn't be sure, because if Sensei wanted the marshmallow, then it meant he was important somehow. He had to leave because he had been shot 3 times, Tamura should have seen that backup would show up at some point, because that's what heroes do, they get backup if they can't fight their own fights. And All Might had yeeted the Nomu into the sun, and the marshmallow had just disappeared into nothingness when All Might had shown up, maybe he should look for stronger people to get. But right now he had healing to do, and a worried Kurogiri to convince he was fine, because he really had to fight the boss in the game he had been interrupted from. When Hitoshi got back to his house the same day, he didn't return the same, because this time he had much more trauma than he did when he left the house, and this family had traumatized him a lot in the 2 years he had been with them. And he should probably try to guilt-trip them into putting him into therapy, because he needs a therapist that can make him process the trauma he has gathered over the life he has lived. Maybe even figure out his family tree to see if he has any living family left alive, because then he could force himself into their life, so his own life could get easier, and their life a lot harder with a hormonal teen in their house. That's a pretty solid plan if he has ever had one, because he could even do all that legally, the family member couldn't kick him out of pity of lost family member that didn't have his own family any longer. Hitoshi sighed silently as he flopped down on his bed, and tried to go to sleep without thinking about the attack that happened that day. It didn't work, and he spent almost the whole night on his phone watching funny videos. His life really has gone from bad to worse really fast, now he just has to figure out his family tree. Hitoshi was thinking back to the days when he had just started his high school, and the tears in his eyes got even worse, now he really was traumatized, and all. Because of one FNG family tree. Why did he have to subject himself to this? Why? 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 WHY. The door to his room opened, and then he walked to Hitoshi, and sat on the floor next to his bed in the house, and all Hitoshi could do was hug his legs to his chest tightly. Why? Hitoshi asked with desperation in his voice, and then hiccuped quietly as his eyes finally looked into his eyes, and there was no answer to his question, only silent comfort Hitoshi didn't want. Izuku may have underestimated the power of a person who couldn't get up from a hospital bed, because right now he was being smacked up the head with the hand of Blonde Bird. And he really doesn't know why he was being smacked up the head by him, but the glare on Butterfly's face add that he wanted to have a one-on-one fight with Izuku, so he takes this over that. Before Izuku could leave the hospital room, Cockatoo was forcing him to sit on his lap, and put his hands around Izuku's waist to stop him from fleeing, because that was all that he wanted to do at this moment. Because Izuku doesn't do PDA, public display of affection, and when he does it's because he slept with them or they're taking their dying breath. So he did the next best thing, and froze his body to be non-responsive, because he doesn't know how to be affectionate towards any kind of people, all the affection he did was sleep around, cuddle or head pats. And those are considered weird by everyone except lovers. Expect head pats, but those are usually for students that did a good job at something, so not so far off. Izuku doesn't know how long they were on the hospital floor, but he did know that he let his brain go slow motion, not sleep, never sleep, he didn't sleep around people except when he slept with them. But he believes that somehow his presence helped Butterfly feel better, because the other went to sleep when he saw how relaxed Izuku was being, right there on the floor, on Cockatoo's lap. Safe. It didn't take long for the two men to fall asleep, so Izuku left when he knew they were both gone to the world, and asleep together in the same room together with no enemies close. Gosh, Izuku loved how safe the world was in the future, and how it was so much better for the children to live in this lifetime rather than the last lifetime he had been in. Izuku teleported into the Stoatling's office, and there the two started their planning for the future attacks that were for sure going to happen, because so far that attack couldn't have been the last one. He didn't realize how sad the married couple had been when they woke up to Izuku being gone from the room, or how they had been disappointed in themselves for believing to have gotten somewhere finally.